January 8th, 2019 study session. We have one item on our agenda, which is preparation for our retreat. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to the city manager and then to Heather.
Great, thanks, Sam. So I guess I'm the person that's setting the context for what I hope will be a robust and interesting discussion about your priorities for the coming year. So my role tonight is to go over the 14 priorities that you established at the retreat, kind of say where we are, what's up next with them, and talk about any other hanging chads, so to speak, that we have. At your desk is a document called Update on Council's Priority Projects and Other Major Projects. So this was actually a talking point document that was prepared for me to make our presentation tonight, but I thought that it was so well done, thank you Tammy Burnett and Chris Meschuk, that I wanted you to have it so that you can follow along. And so I'm really not going to read everything on here. I'm just going to talk about what's coming up next. And then the other document that you have was prepared by Lynette. Thank you, Lynette, from the city clerk's office, which is the voting, if you will, that you all did when you wrote into Hotline with your priority areas and then listed other projects that you were hopeful that we would get to this year. So those two documents are there for you to use. Hopefully I can go through this quickly. So on to my items, which is what's been accomplished in the 14 priority areas. So under the electric utility development, I know that you're very familiar with the fact that only a few short weeks ago, you approved a process to acquire Xcel Energy assets. Where we are right now is that, of course, staff continues to work on that. In addition, there is a Public Utilities Commission pre-hearing conference in mid-January to talk about some items. One of the great things that we did this last year under council's guidance is we had a working group that was talking about communication and engagement, and we've prepared an engagement guide that we'll be following as we move forward and get ready for a vote in November 2020. Under broadband, the council approved the motion to proceed with the development of the backbone of the fiber network. And we actually have gotten, I think you knew this because we had a discussion about it a couple weeks ago, an RFP. We had several vendors respond. We've awarded that contract. And so design of the fiber network is now underway. Under the climate commitment, the first item here talks about our reduction in 2017. And just a reminder is that we do a greenhouse gas inventory, but it's always 1 year behind. And so we're very proud to say that at the end of 2017, we had reduced our greenhouse gas emissions in the community by 16%, which was well ahead of the goal that we had set. Among the things that we're working on right now is investigating a non-electric vehicle fee. So we are doing a fee study to determine what an appropriate fee would be. And council also directed staff to do some preliminary work on what it would look like to do a tax on natural gas. And we'll be bringing that material back to you on March 5th for an update. So that's coming back to you in just 2 months. Commercial linkage fees, I don't think I need to say much about that because we've completed that, and thanks to council for all your hard work last year to help us get that done. Community benefit is one that we spent quite a bit of time on in 2018. It has been impacted by the work of some other projects that have taken precedence or will be taking precedence, but we'll be continuing the work in 2019. So in the first quarter, we're going to be doing public outreach. In quarters 2 and 3, we're going to be analyzing the status of community benefit feedback and preparing options. And we hope to have study sessions with the planning board and the city council in the 4th quarter with adoption in early 2020. Now, I will talk a little bit later about opportunity zones because this is related to the opportunity zones. And so there is part of this work that will be accomplished in 2019 and finished. The next thing is the Housing Advisory Board, which again, thanks to the urging of one or more council members, we got that accomplished early in 2018, and that board has been very effectively working and has provided you input on ADUs and OAUs. Large homes and lots. So this is one that we've talked about quite a bit in the end of Q3 and all of Q4 of 2018. The scope of this project, I think, changed a bit and expanded a bit as we got through to December. And so you know that you've made some decisions about what the project goals are and what the timing is. We will have our first study session on this on May 14th. Well, this will be the work that you asked us to do in December. We'll be bringing back on May 14th with the hope that we have some final decisions of council in the time frame of Q3. So we think that's moving ahead well. The manufactured housing strategy, staff met with the residents of all 4 parks, as well as the owners and managers of each park, and we've entered into research collaborations with both the CU School of Law and Boulder Affordable Housing Research Initiative, and we're working on a draft white paper. This is coming to you on February 26th in a study session, so you'll be giving us direction at that time how to move forward. Under sub-community planning, you have a discussion about this in 1 week. So that's coming forward. We hired a new staff member in 2018. You heard an excellent study session that you had in September where we identified the 6 foundational elements of the program. We completed study sessions with both the council and the planning board. And again, your next input will come in a week. Alpine balsam is sort of a subset of this one. And as you know, in recent months, we've had a number of study sessions on this as well. You're going to be getting your next update on February 12th, depending on if CAC agrees that it should be scheduled then. And we will be starting to prepare for the deconstruction of the hospital in Q3 after the hospital folks exit the hospital building. So that's moving along. The open space master plan is completely on track. Our goal was to finish it in 2019 before November 5th-ish. And so we've had a number of meetings with council. The council established our master plan focus groups. We've had 3 community engagement windows and have had great participation. We're entering another period of time where we'll be working on other parts of the focus areas. I think the financial is the next one up. Thank you, Dan. And so this is on track to be approved by OSBT and the council before November. Shared Equity Middle Income Program. Now, this is one where council members Weaver and Yates drafted a white paper and disseminated that, and staff has been working on a work plan and engagement strategy for this item. This is scheduled for a council discussion on February 19th. So at that point, you'll be taking a look at the recommendations of staff based on the white paper and giving us direction to move forward. The transportation master plan is one that you've seen in study sessions on a number of occasions. We've got a number of updates scheduled for later this year. I think that council will need to discuss, as will CAC, how often you want us to come back in the study session format, because I know that we're trying to be careful about how often we come back on some of these items. But what's going on right now on the transportation master plan is that we're working on the fiscal impacts that the transportation master plan implies. So we always need more money for transportation. The next one is the use tables and site review criteria updates. And this is another topic, along with community benefit, that has been impacted by some changes in our work plan. So we've already had 5 planning board subcommittee meetings in 2018 and the check-in with the planning board. Really great work has been done, and we are on track to continue the work in 2019. Some of this work is going to be part of the Opportunity Zone moratorium updates that we'll be having in coming weeks, and some of it that I guess is less related to the Opportunity Zone will be coming forward more in the Q4 timeframe. So what we're planning on doing is subcommittee work with the planning board in the first 2 quarters, developing options in the 3rd quarter, study sessions with council and planning board in the 4th quarter, and then hopefully council adoption the 1st quarter of 2020. And yet, part of it is the Opportunity Zone, so that is something that you'll see in 2019. Vision Zero, We have an update scheduled in the second quarter here. Just a reminder that we did 140 engineering treatments at high crash locations, and we've been working on new traffic signal operations, including left turn phasing, pedestrian head start, and right turn on red restrictions. So we'll be providing more information in the second quarter. So the next thing that I was asked to talk about is how have current projects expanded? So I think you're well aware of the fact that we had kind of planned that the large lots was one that we were going to start in 2019, and that we really didn't have a work plan established, but the work that you've done in September, November, and December has, I think, expanded that project a little bit. We're on track to get that done in 2019, but that's one that expanded a bit. The South Boulder flood mitigation project, I think, expanded a little bit in 2018 when we had a number of hearings in front of the City Council about the appropriate option to choose, and that required some new engineering for us to do. But again, that one's on track, and I think it's scheduled to come back to you in early February. So there'll be some updates very soon on that. So the biggest expansion, I guess, would come in the project related to the community benefit and use tables. And then during the year, the council asked that we take a look at BC zoning. And that topic was related in some ways to community benefit and use tables. And then when the opportunity zone moratorium discussion came up, the BC zoning is a very important part of that, because one of the most targeted areas of the opportunity zone is the Diagonal Plaza, which has this zoning on it. And so this is one of the things that we'll be tackling early in 2019. So those are projects that have kind of expanded more than we thought they would, but they're really focused on some things that council cares about, in particular this BC zoning and the use tables. And then certainly in general, the opportunity zone moratorium is something that was not expected, and I think we have a plan that we're working on to come back to you over time and tweak that moratorium to make sure that projects can move ahead, but that we've got safeguards on board for concerns that the community has raised. So then, if you'll turn the page, there is a page called Other Major Projects. So one of the things council asked us to provide information on is what are some other things that really weren't part of the priority projects, but that are pretty big projects for the staff and for council that you might be seeing. So the first one is the Budget Resilience Project. This is a project where we have received a grant from the Department of Local Affairs to, I guess, pilot a way in which we can show a budget that demonstrates resilience over the years. And so this is an internal staff project, but we hope by the end of the year we will have a product for the Department of Local Affairs that they would like to use in other places in Colorado, and of course for our council and community to show that we are being able to demonstrate a budget that can show resilience year over year. Campaign finance reforms, you just had a study session on that very shortly ago, and have given direction to the city clerk's office and the city attorney's office about some things to bring back, and we'll be working on those and hopefully get those to you in the latter part of the first quarter or the first part of the second quarter. CU flood mitigation and annexation is definitely on the table, or on our plates, I guess I'll say, for council to be working on throughout the entire year. We're waiting for CU to submit their annexation petition, and we'll probably know more about that by the end of this month. The equity journey is one that council's been very involved in. We've got actually a subcommittee of Lisa and Mary working on this with staff, and so you'll be hearing more about this as the year goes by. The fire master plan is up for review this year. We're hoping that it will come to you at the end of summer or early fall. But a thing that we really want to highlight is the emergency medical services and the study that was done on cost and the fiscal impact. One of the things to mention with regard to that is that the fiscal impact is pretty clear about what the operating costs are, but a thing that we'll have to be thinking about is what are the capital costs that go along with it? Because currently our fire stations would not accommodate the kind of ambulance equipment that we would need. And so we would have to phase it in over time. And so we'll be providing more information about that as we go along. The library initiatives, you had a long study session about this, and we are in the process of seeking a polling consultant to do the polling study and survey that you asked, and our plan is to return to council in April with that information, and then we'll move forward as council directs. I'm not sure why we put mobile homes on separately from manufactured housing strategy. Yes, it is important. And then the last two are, again, related to the Opportunity Zone moratorium. We've got some code changes that, some that council requested and that will really fit in well with our Opportunity Zone moratorium. So those are the major projects that we think you'll be seeing later this year.
Thanks, Jane.
You're welcome.
So council, part of your pre-retreat homework was to look at that first list of things that Jane went through and indicate what your respective priorities are. There's some consistency in your responses, and there's a couple of folks that are in a different place. And I thought we just might want to discuss where one or more of you are not sort of roughly in the same rating place as others, to see if that was due to a different understanding or a different strategy that perhaps you deployed in your prioritization, or if you just fundamentally have a different set of priorities. So if we start at the beginning on that table that Lynette passed out, that is the prioritization at the top, it says existing priority areas. I'm guessing yours doesn't say Heather at the top, but mine does. Use tables and site review criteria. It looks like you're all pretty much in the same spot there. Did anyone have any questions or clarifying curiosities for Jane on that one? Or are we good? Silence will be construed as we're cool, girl. All right. Community benefit. Aaron, I can't help but notice that your colleagues on council all had that as a really high number, and you had that high priority, and you gave that one a 10. Did you think about that one differently, or what do you think?
It's just a perfect 10. It's a great project. No, I just yeah, that stood out to me as well. I mean, I do feel like that's a good project for us to get to. It's just that we've had so many other things come up recently. I'm not sure that we can get to it soon. So I'm happy to work on it when we work on it.
Okay.
But we do have some time-sensitive things that the council has brought to the table in the last few months that I think we need to get to.
Okay, but based on what Jane said so far, you're comfortable with how things are proceeding on that one? Schedule-wise.
My first choice, but I'm fine. It's fine.
Thank you. Great. Anybody else have thoughts or questions on that one? Bob?
Just a question. Remind me, the height limitation ties to community benefit. Is that right, Sam?
Yes.
Okay, and that expires in second quarter 2020? May 2020. Thanks. Okay.
Okay. Anything else on that? All right. Large lots, fair amount of alignment there. Anyone have any questions, concerns about that one? All right, so on manufactured housing strategy, I see that Suzanne put that one in a slightly different place, but she's not here. So I'm comfortable just carrying on, and we can circle back to her at the retreat unless anyone has any information. Okay, cool. We're so efficient tonight. Shared equity middle income program, that's an interesting one. Suzanne as well put that one as a 9, where others of you were sort of in the 3 to 5 range. And then Aaron, there you are again, darling.
Yeah, that's all eyes on me. No, I think it's promising. We just have a lot of other important things to get to. And then this one, I mean, community benefit does have some ties to things that are time sensitive, but this one less so. So it feels like we can get to it when we get to it.
Mm-hmm. You wouldn't bump other things to put that one first? Okay, great. Anybody else have thoughts or questions about that one?
I just think we've made a lot of progress on it. And we don't want to lose the momentum, so that's all I would say is that we've kind of evolved our thinking working with Kurt, and I think we've been making progress. So I look forward to the study session where we talk about it.
Keep chipping away at it.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Open space master plan. Aaron? Oh, sorry, Alpine Balsam, thank you. Alpine Balsam, oh, that's Mary. Mary. And Lisa, I had heard that you had a 12 there, but someone told me that you switched that to a 6. Okay. Let me hear from Mary first, and I'll come back to you. All right, Mary, hit me.
The footnote isn't included. My footnote on that was that priority, sub-community planning is still an important project, but given the the opportunity zone and where it is, and that we were considering having perhaps the East Boulder subcommunity be the second one. I think it needs to get bumped up.
Bumped up.
So I moved that one down because I think another one should bump up.
Okay. And have your thoughts changed hearing Jane's summary that she just provided, or you're still thinking the same thing?
I'm still thinking.
Okay, cool. So Lisa, you did the old switcheroo. Want to talk about that?
Yeah, but I'm still pretty much where Mary is.
Okay.
So we've already started, and I put it kind of down, and I didn't mean it in a low place. We're already working on that, and I guess every council member kind of ranked it under different categories, you noticed?
Yep.
And so when I went back and I looked at it, it said, my heading is important for this council to continue significant progress in 2019, but will continue. And so, I mean, we're kicking it off. We're not going to stop at this point. And so I think.
So can I interject too?
Yes.
Just remember, this is the next thing council's going to talk about just a week from now.
Right.
And so-
Literally the next thing.
Yeah. And so we'll be able to figure that out in that context.
So it doesn't matter if I'm a 12 or a 6.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, Bob? And then Sam?
I ranked it real high because, and I may have been under incorrect assumption, maybe next week's session on this will help me. I was cognizant of the fact that we're going to get the property in June and we're going to start tearing buildings down shortly after that night. I guess I kind of assumed that we would have to have a bit of a plan because we need to know which buildings to tear down. I realize it'll take us quite a long time to deconstruct that, and we don't have to have the plan in perfect shape, this year, but I assume that we have to have some direction from council on what this is going to be sometime this year, just so we know how to deconstruct, or is that a false assumption?
So my understanding is that council has given us direction that we are to deconstruct the hospital building and move forward with providing further information on the pavilion and its reuse for city facilities.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. I think that's where I was focusing, is the pavilion building, whether you needed further direction or clarification for us in the pavilion building, because that might impact deconstruction.
And we'll be providing some more information, I think it's in February.
Okay. Sam and then Mary?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to reiterate, I'm in the same place that Lisa and Mary are. I think the sub-community planning project is really important, but I think we need to look east now. And the idea previously had been, we're doing all this area planning and corridor planning in the north central Boulder, so that makes a good spot to do it. But I think recent events have changed the focus. So we have to still address Alpine Balsam, but I think sub-community planning, maybe a next step is to look at how we define the eastern sub-communities.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and the Alpine Balsam is really more dependent on an area plan, which is a subset of a sub-community plan. So that can be done, and then I'm looking forward to the conversation next week, but that was kind of my thinking, is that the area plan would get done, and then we could move on to the sub-community plan in the east
Okay, Bob?
side of the opportunity zone.
That's a great clarification, Mary. And so then I guess this would be a question for Jane, which maybe we can talk about a little bit more at the retreat. Can we do the Alpine Balsam area plan and the East Boulder sub-community plan more or less in parallel, or is there a staff constraint there that would prohibit them from happening in parallel?
I'll ask the planning department to be able to respond to that at the retreat.
And if there's a sequencing or timing thing are there other options other than exactly simultaneous or exactly sequential? There's some variety? Like one tapers down, finish up, things like that? Yeah, okay. Cool. All right, anything else on that one? All right. Then the open space master plan. Aaron?
Yeah, so I, along with Mary, serve on the Open Space Master Plan Process Subcommittee, which just rolls off your tongue, that
Very pithy.
name. And so we've been working closely with the Open Space Department on the master plan. And I know that it's their goal to really get that done within this council's time period. So I was just bringing that forward just to say, to emphasize that there's a real hope on the part of the department, which I think is a good hope, good goal to finish it this year. So I made sure to put it up there high.
Okay,
We
and-
got to it.
And based on what you've heard from Jane and her report, you feel like that's on target?
Jane says we're on track, but I know more from our open space process work that we are on track,
Okay.
and that's great.
Fantastic. All right, anybody else have thoughts on that one? Okay,
Just to agree with Erin,
okay.
with that, yeah, that it's on track and
Taken away?
it's going quite,
Yeah, excellent. How about on climate commitment? Here, there's actually more variety where some of you put this as lower in your list of priorities, and others of you have it kind of smack dab in the middle. So, Lisa, can I start with you on this one? What was your thinking on that one?
We're doing it. We're totally dedicated to it. We've got different staff, different departments working on this. And I mean, in my life, it's a top priority, and I expect it to be in the city. But I think the council itself has given enough direction to staff that they're doing a great job.
Okay. Sam, were you in a similar place?
Yeah, I mean, it's a top priority for me, but the way I sorted my things into buckets were what's going on now that's already on course and is going to continue beyond this council, and what we have to focus on in the last year. And so I think climate commitment's very much on track.
Okay. And Mary, similarly?
it's a commitment, right? It's kind of like
in the name.
like getting married, you know? It kind of keeps going, hopefully.
Okay, so that data then, the variety there just reflects how you were thinking about the question. Because it's already underway and you're well in it, it remains a high priority, just not so much council time investment.
It's not going to stop in 2019.
Is it because you're married now?
That's right, no divorces.
Okay, fantastic. Then similarly on the utility, coming down, the electric utility, Suzanne had at a 5, where other council members are sort of more in the 7 to 11 range. My presumption without her being here is a similar reasoning. Would that be your expectation as well? Okay. Vision Zero, there we have some fair consistency there, but then again, Erin, you put that slightly higher in your list than other folks did. What do you think about that?
It's a life safety issue. I think some of the other things that we're working on are a little more optional, but this is about protecting the life and safety of our citizens. So I want to make sure it stays up at the top of the priority list.
Okay, and then similarly as before, based on what you've heard from Jane, are you satisfied with the pace that is
I
proceeding?
feel like it could use a little more attention.
A little more oomph? Yep.
I think these numbers, we can't take them too seriously.
Your mic's not on.
These numbers, we can't take them too seriously because we put them out sequentially, and then we have different things. So, I mean, one way you could look at it is how people put them out, under what categories. And so, for me, I would give it equal to the sub-area plan, transportation plan, and Vision Zero, and so that would move it up to a 3.
Okay. Yeah, Bob?
First of all, I agree with Erin. This is a life safety issue, and it is a priority. And I actually didn't get a lot of comfort from the beginning of the conversation. So I would like to get more comfortable at the retreat about our I know we're not going to have a deep dive on Vision Zero at the retreat, but it would be helpful to have a little bit more information about what our timetable is so at the retreat so that we can react to that, because I actually am a little bit more uncomfortable now than I was at the beginning of this meeting about where we are and what our track is.
Okay. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very important life safety consideration, but again, to me, it's a program that's moving forward. So it's already, it's established as a program, it's moving forward. And I think our actions on it are kind of like Bob said, to review the specifics. I mean, I wasn't comfortable with what we were presented as far as some of the transportation responses to wanting, some treatments of like no right turn on red in certain locations and longer leading walk signals. So there are some things that I think can be done better. This was brought home to me in December when I was crossing Canyon with my cell phone in my pocket with a walk signal, and I almost got killed. And so I had to jump out of the way of the person making the left turn that wasn't paying attention. So it is a life safety issue. It is important, and I do hope our staff keeps moving forward with some of the details, and then we review them.
Jane, do you need more information from council in terms of what more information they would like at the retreat?
No.
Okay, you think you got it?
Yes.
Heather, could I add,
Yes,
one
please.
thing? I mean, I agree with Lisa that these are a little arbitrary. I mean, when I had my buckets, but within the buckets, they were a little random with where they went within
Yep.
the bucket. But just one thing I wanted to say about the like for me, the transportation master plan got a 12 for me, but I feel like a lot of that is linked to the Vision Zero stuff, particularly like the work on the low stress bike safety network or bike network. So those are two things together that I'd like to make sure that we prioritize pretty highly this year to make sure we keep making progress on safety for our folks.
So I also want to say this, is that what I am actually hearing from council members is maybe not that they need more factual information about Vision Zero, but more of a commitment and a sense of urgency on the part of staff that we really mean to make a difference in this area. So if I'm wrong, let me know, but I think that's what you would like to hear.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else on that? All right. Anything else for Jane or for one another or for me as your retreat person on these items that are currently underway now that we need to talk about before we move on? Yep, Bob?
I have a process question for you. So obviously, we should revisit this when Cindy and Zan can join us. But what do you see, since there is a high degree of consensus on the top issues, what do you see us doing at the retreat with these items?
Can we talk about that when we get to our retreat agenda?
Sure.
Because I think my answer might also depend on how the rest of this goes.
Got it.
Cool, thanks. Don't let me forget, though. All right. Anything else? All right. So Jane, thanks for that. That was very helpful. If you have a gander at ye old agenda for this evening, the next item before we get to your additional priorities that you put on Hotmail is to talk about the boards and commission feedback. You, as you have been doing for several years, have letters from your boards and commissions, and you have assignments for who's going to report them out. We have in the past had a fairly loosey-goosey guideline of 2-ish minutes for each report because there are so many, and if we treat them all fairly, then no one feels like you only talked at great length about your favorite one. So I have a list of assignments. My question for you is, each one of you want to do your whole kit and caboodle and talk all at once and get your 6-ish minutes out of the way? That'd be easiest? Okay, cool, that's what we'll do then. Then Aaron, your last name starts with B, so you get to go first.
I'm going to ask to not go first because I don't
Fantastic.
have my stuff together.
Okay.
So sorry, I just.
You know, those of us at the end of the alphabet always get discriminated against, don't we, Mary?
Mm-hmm. Young or Yates, would you like to go first?
Why, Bob? Why, Mary?
Mary, would you like to go first?
No, for the same reason that Aaron.
Do y'all need a minute to get your...
Bob's ready.
Bob's ready. Thank you, sir. All right. Okay, and Lisa's ready. But Bob's going to go first because he feels discriminated against on account of his name is at the end of the
I
alphabet.
just want to get it over with.
And Bob, you'll
Although-
also pick up OSBT as part of yours?
I did. As a matter of fact, I'll start with OSBT because I'm
Thank
not
you.
going to do it in alphabetical order. OSBT actually took the questions we had to them seriously and actually answered the questions. Some of our boards didn't do that, although they gave us good information anyway. In response to our first question, how are we doing? They said, great. And they gave 4 examples. They really like the support they've gotten from council, particularly Aaron and Mary, on the master plan. They really are happy that we approved all the acquisitions that we put in front of them. They're happy about the fact that we're addressing CU South flood mitigation and that we're including them. And they're happy that we took their thoughts seriously on the prairie dog management. So they're happy campers with us. Looking forward, they had 2 suggestions with respect to work plan. They want us to continue to be engaged with them on the master plan. And they were happy that their master plan work was part of the public participation pilot. You know, we had a public participation working group that made a number of recommendations, and we council decided that one of the test drives of that new engagement process would be through the master plan for open space. And they committed to us that they will give us feedback at the end of master plan process about how that went and whether there are improvements in public engagement that we can embrace. And then second, they asked us to allow them to stay involved in the CU South flood mitigation work because, of course, it does impact open space. And so they asked us to keep them in the loop on that. And that's what open space had to say.
Okay, great. Any questions for Bob? All right.
The Beverage Licensing Authority is all about budgeting this year. They had 2 suggestions for us. One is they think that we can we, staff and council, can enhance our communications to the community about the city's long-term budget. They didn't elaborate on that. They just think that's something we can do a better job of. And secondly, they had a suggestion that we create a budgeting 101 class. And the first students in that would be city council, followed by members of the community. And they suggested that that be live and taped so that members of the community could look on the website to see how we go about budgeting. So those are recommendations probably for staff from the BLA.
Okay. Any questions? Nope. Good.
And finally, the Environmental Advisory Board had lots and lots of things to say, so I'll try to do it quickly. They had 6 goals for the community. First, related to organic pesticides. They want us to have an organic pesticide solution for city properties, and that we would share that then with the community so the community members could use organic pesticides themselves on their own properties. Second, they would like the city to address the heat island effect. And they had several suggestions on how to do that, including using building materials that tend to reflect heat. When we do land use approvals, to look for surface areas that are less impervious, to encourage tree planting, and to encourage energy efficiency. Number 3 of their 6, they would like us to look at ways to shift our stormwater conveyance from gray runoff sources to green sources. And the example of that would be, rather than using concrete, use grass. And not just on surfaces, even on roofs. Mm-hmm. Fourth, with respect to the emerald ash borer situation, as those effects are felt and as those trees unfortunately come down, they recommend that the city, at least on city property, replace those trees with native plants that require less watering and that are probably better adapted to our environment as opposed to non-native plants. And then by doing so, that we could be leaders in the community, and that we could even provide incentives to members of the community who want to replace their emerald ash borer trees with, or emerald trees, ash trees that are affected by emerald ash borer with native plants. And finally, fifth, air quality, monitor and reduce vehicle trips. Kind of ties into the transportation master plan. And sixth and finally, soil quality. They observed that of the 15,000 acres of agricultural land that the city manages or owns, 2,000 are considered degraded, and they recommend the city inventory those degraded lands, protect those non-degraded lands, and continue to monitor them. That's what the EAB had to say.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Bob, thank you for going first. All right. Oh, do you want to go next, Lisa? Or you want her? Because she's been discriminated against her whole life.
Well, I don't know why.
You're right there in the middle, Em. Yeah.
It's why.
Oh, ha ha. You're so funny. All right, Miss Y, what do you got for us?
Okay, I have, the Boulder Junction Access District. And first, the Boulder Junction Access District, BJAD, gave us a list of their priorities that included modification or replacement of the Depot Square garage software, developing a 10-year Boulder Junction TDM parking plan, advocating for additional capital improvements within Boulder Junction, and including the bridge to 32nd and the bike shelter, branding for BJAD, and also involvement of BJAD in where the commission, their priority is continued involvement in service delivery from RTD. And they also would like us to ensure that the Pollard site develops in a way that aligns with the goals and objectives of the district. And then in response to how well has council done, so they like that we continue to focus on RTD service improvements, especially refreshing the hop route. And they, as well as looking at the quiet crossings, which are still in process. And then one of their final comments was that they would like council to include them in in our priorities for some emphasis on the integration of TDM and parking strategies across communities, not just BJAD, to realize the many benefits of the shared unbundled and managed and paid policy. And that is BJAD. Then Planning Board, which I inherited from Jill. The Planning Board mentioned several items under a topic of public engagement. They mentioned their involvement in the use tables and the public outreach that will be happening with large homes and large lots. Wanting to combine that, actually wanting to combine the use tables and standards use tables project with the large lots and community benefits outreach that's going to be happening in early 2019. They would like to form a subcommittee that looks at how private development engages the public. And they're willing to put the work into it, and because they see that as something that really needs to happen within our community. Again, that's, and then also another suggestion that they made was to increase or expand the public notification area to include businesses, small businesses, and renters. Basically, anybody who's leasing or renting that otherwise would not get notified. And then under housing, the priorities that they mentioned were the preservation of existing affordable housing stock. They mentioned tiny homes, that they should be considered, however, in relationship with some other project. And they gave examples of the large lots, the use tables, municipalization, climate commitment, manufactured housing, ADUs, and compatible development. CU planning they mentioned, and wanting us to be sure that that the flood management is optimized regarding flood management and open space restoration and preservation of CU South, and that it's an important way to support long-range sustainability and resiliency. Under retention of small and local businesses, they have some ideas, including using zoning and changes to the use table and making small and local businesses, business retention a form of community benefit. And then under resilience, Planning Board urges the City Council to direct staff to pursue implementation of new BVCP policies regarding floodplains, regarding flooding, floodplains, and groundwater, in addition to prioritizing floodplain preservation. They are really happy to be having joint board interactions with transportation. And then finally, under growth and infrastructure, they would like to see a publicly available dashboard summarizing Boulder's overall infrastructure capacity to assist in the consideration and planning of future projects. And then finally, UCAMC, that is the University Hill Commercial Area Management Commission. I believe that's what the...
Another snazzy name that just rolls off the tongue.
UCAMC. And this, I'm going to mention this one because they underlined it in their letter. And so it seems like it's something that's really important to them. We propose that the city sell the UJIT parking lot on Pleasant Street to the hotel developer and apply the funds from the sale to the cost of constructing an above-ground parking structure on the current UJIT parking lot on 14th Street, possibly in a public-private partnership with adjoining property owners. So that was their major point under how well has council done. Under taking into account the current work plan, what additional priorities do you think council should focus on? They have seeking funds to replace old and failing streetlights in commercial district at an estimated cost of $400,000. Support development of the Hill Hotel. Continue to pursue strategies to address transient presence, such as increased police presence during weekdays, and then the cost for overtime and officer staffing. They didn't provide that, but they provided it as a TBD. And continue implementation of alley improvement program, and then finally continue to pursue opportunities to engage and partner with CU. And that's it.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Mary on any of her groups? All right, Lisa, you're up.
So I have arts, landmarks, and RAB, water resources. So I got to get to the top. So the Arts Commission, their big things this year is affordable housing for artists, and including also studio, performance, and retail space for artists, musicians, dancers, writers, and actors. And it's a top priority for individuals and organizations in the arts community. They say there's an acute need for additional staff capacity to ensure that the program meets goals and community expectations. They're very pleased with the additional grant funds of $250,000, and they applaud council's recognition of the need for the higher levels of funding for organizations that own or maintain long-term leases on facilities, and I think that's great, and I think Bob really kind of brought that to a head, so I want to recognize Bob for that. They would like to, that the Arts Commission will be having a new member in March, and they want us to make sure that the individuals that we consider represent populations of our community that have been historically underrepresented and on our boards. So, so that's arts. It was short and sweet.
That's good.
Next is landmarks. Let me get down to L's. And landmarks, they have they appreciate council support and opportunity to provide input. They applaud the new ADU ordinance changes enacted by council and recognize and include some of their previous suggestions, such as preserving existing houses. They encourage the council to explore ways and means to provide funding to assist property owners both entering designation status and for making appropriate alterations to their historic buildings. As identified in the City of Boulder's Historic Preservation Plan, Recommendation 1.6, initiate new incentives. Possible options include specific grant funding for maintaining historic properties, low or no interest loans, and increases to existing fee waivers. In terms of environmental hazards and historic preservation, they note that as the city in the council plan for increased resiliency, they make the following recommendations. They would like to see pre-disaster mitigation maps, such as updated and accurate survey forms. They want to see appropriate collaboration with other city departments for the possibility of fast-tracking design review in the wake of disaster events. And they want a template for coordinated interdepartmental disaster response and creative interdepartmental collaboration to better preserve vulnerable historic resources. And in terms of sustainability, surveys and historic documentation, the technology of documentation needs to be preserved in its highest form to provide complete and accessible data for future planning and preserving historic resources, and they hope that council will support this. And they welcome our feedback. And then on the last one, the Water Resources Advisory Board. This is a board that's not too happy with us. And they were dismayed to see our decisions and things like that. And and I want to say, they think that we should at least recognize their recommendations. We do recognize their recommendations, but they are advisory. That's why their name is called Water Resources Advisory Board. They don't make decisions, and they need to understand that.
Okay.
And so I think it's very unfortunate that they think that they're the deciders when they don't understand, I don't think, what their role is. I understand and appreciate their technical background, but
What's in their letter?
I'm reading it.
okay.
And so they just lambasted us about the South Boulder Creek. And so, and I think maybe they don't understand that they need to be independent of staff as well.
Okay.
And that they need to, they're appointed to Water Resources Advisory Board in order to, for their various expertise. But it's to advise, and in fact, if you look them up, it says the Water Resource Advisory Board advises the city council, planning board, and city staff on community utilities issues. So I went through a whole bunch of old RAB meeting notes, and it seems to me that there's very little discussion and that there isn't a lot of independent thinking on their part. So I would encourage them to do that. I also, in reading the notes, there has been what do we call, a liaison to their board from planning board, because RAB is supposed to advise city council, planning board, and city staff.
Oh, cool.
And so that individual is not being included very much in their discussions, nor receiving information, the same exchanges that they should. And in fact, by the outgoing and incoming was told not to participate. So
Oh, heavens,
this is
okay.
a problem.
Okay.
So
You
we
might
have
want
a
to circle
problem.
back to that at some point. Okay, excellent. Any questions for Lisa? All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, now, Mirabai, should I just keep craning my neck this way, or shall I go this way for a minute?
I'll be ready after one more.
Fantastic. All right, give my neck a job here. Well, you're the W on this side. I feel like maybe it should be your turn, just to stick with the theme.
Years of sitting at the back of the classroom.
And look where that got you.
Right, exactly.
All right, what do you got for us, Sam?
I've got Design Advisory Board, and they did not send us a formal letter that the whole board had approved, but Lauren Folkerts, the chair, sent us a note explaining why, that they've had trouble getting a quorum. But she also suggested that one of the needs from a design perspective of Boulder is to have more of an urban design plan. So in other words, we have this land use plan and we have zoning, but they're talking about building form. And my response to this is it sounds an awful lot like form-based code. And so we've kind of started doing that in a few places in town. And I'd have to agree that if we could magically wave our wand and have that kind of form-based code everywhere, it would be a good thing for Boulder, because there would be yet another refinement to the vision. So that's something for us to think about, is where and how we use form-based code, because we probably can't do it absolutely everywhere, but some places it makes a lot of sense. My other board was Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, which I call the Happy Board, and I'm happy to get this one this year. Though they answered our questions as well. And they think that we have been listening to them. They wanted to emphasize a few points to us. One of them was that parks, because they're public spaces, often have impacts from drug use there, trash, and human waste showing up in the parks, and that negatively impacts many people's experience there. So they wanted us to continue to try and develop mitigation for those problems. The second thing that they mentioned was that financing of park infrastructure is always a really big deal. And so they appreciated the commitment that council had given to maintaining their budget level this year. And that segues into their priorities that they listed out for us. And the first one is financial stability. So I can certainly understand that. The second one is equity of access, meaning equity of all different classes of people to be able to access, even people who have been traditionally underserved by the system. And then the last one was for them to focus on the impacts of growth and development and densification, on what that does for the need for park services and how it might move some of the needs, around as different areas densify. So that's pretty much their note. It was short and pretty straightforward.
And apparently quite happy.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Anyone have questions for Sam? All right. Aaron.
All right, I've got three. We'll start with the Board of Zoning Adjustments, or BOZA. So they had some concrete proposals. They work on variances, particularly in single-family homes. And so one of the things they actually requested is that they don't even need to see all of the variance requests that come to them, that staff could be empowered to approve some of the smaller things to save community members the time and expense of coming to a BOZA hearing. So they recommended staff get more of those. With ADUs, they had some thoughts on that. I think they were happy that we tackled the problem. They weren't necessarily exactly happy with how it came out, but just wanted to make sure that as we move into implementation of the changes to the ADU ordinance, that we flesh out the details such that it's interpretable by BOZA, because I think we did give them some additional authority to grant variances for ADUs in places where they don't meet the rules exactly. So they're hoping for more clarity around that with regards to parking, the variance criteria in general, and then how the compatible development rules will combine with the ADU's regulations. So hopefully that's something that planning staff can look over and communicate with them, because it's a little bit more of a technical question, I think, on some of those. But also something to keep in mind as we maybe get to an ADU update, review of that in a year or so. Then they're very interested in the large homes on large lots code change project because it directly impacts a lot of the work that they do with single-family homes. So they have a set of initial questions that they'd like us to consider. And I think they're really looking for council to take advantage of their expertise in these areas as we work on this project. So I think they would love to have a meeting with us and love to work with us on this project. So I think it's something worth considering as we move forward with that, about ways to tap into BOZA's expertise and interest there. And and they're happy to be asked. So that's that. Then the Housing Advisory Board, I've got wordier ones, so I have to take a little time here. Yeah. Some of these go on a little bit, but with good stuff. So the Housing Advisory Board, they did answer our questions, and they feel like council has done a great job of engaging the Housing Advisory Board's priorities in the last 2 years, particularly in creating them. And they're happy to have to see a lot of housing issues as priorities in our work plan. But they don't feel like they need to add to our work plan, which is nice of them because we're busy. And so in terms of their priorities, fundamentally they say they want to work with us on our priority plans that relate to housing. And so, for example, they mentioned that they're happy to take up the CHAFA coordination with affordable housing projects that I know Mary in particular has talked about. So they're happy to work on that and make those go better. But then they do have two things that they're interested in taking up on their own, and I'll just read a little bit here, two study topics they'd like to work on 2019. One of them is tiny homes. They're interested in seeing how tiny homes could enhance housing choice, integrating growth, and achieving future housing goals in the city. And also occupancy limits. Looking at occupancy limits, they say, quote, currently occupancy policies dictate the makeup of a household, forcing non-traditional households to potentially even live in violation of the rules and contribute to an underutilization of existing living space, which is contrary to the city's stance on environmentally beneficial living. So seeing that, they're interested in doing a study on that to see if there might be ways to maybe shift those around a little bit. Anyway, they included some history about their last year and how they've been working, and they're happy to keep working with us.
Fantastic. Excellent. NHRC.
I get one more. Human Services, another wordy one with a lot of data. Human Relations, yes, Human Relations Commission. Okay, so they feel like we've done some good work on the welcoming and inclusion, inclusive community work plan. They appreciate the work that the council has done on that, reaching out to the community on those things, and including support for them to work on their bias-motivated hate crimes and sentence enhancement ordinance. And they are moving that forward, so they're near the completion of that ordinance and would like to see us take that up when they're done with it early this year. And I'm actually going to get back to that when we talk about our priorities for next year. And so then in terms of what else we should be working on and thinking about, they do have some opinions on that. They do want to make sure that we're working hard on fostering a welcoming and inclusive community with some specific ideas about combating rising bias and hate and addressing public safety. So the ordinance they just mentioned, and working with the police department to protect and assist vulnerable community members, also updating language in commission handbooks and ordinances to reflect language that is respectful and inclusive, and training and signage to have the city, encourage the city and local organizations to work together for anti-oppression training for city departments and potentially businesses in the larger community. And then also municipal elections, this is something we talked about before, to extend voting rights in local elections to non-citizens and support that coalition that's bringing that ballot initiative forward. And there's more. To manifest the city's commitment to supporting and retaining a diverse community, so address needs of and increase city support for small, local, and minority-owned businesses, to work on the creation of a multicultural center, and so perhaps at the Alpine Balsam site, to address homelessness, which is, of course, is an enormous topic in and of itself, but they have some specific suggestions. I won't read all of them, but they have ways that they feel we can keep working on the homelessness issues in town. And also a commitment to increased funding of the Human Services Fund, which has had some additional funding, but has mostly been flat over the last number of years. Address growing gaps of economic and social equity. So try to work on those issues within the city. And then noting that there are limited resources within the city and the community for dealing with these, and so to continue to help foster collaboration between agencies and nonprofits in the cities and take advantage of the limited resources that we have.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Anyone have questions for Aaron? All right. Last but not least, hey, Mayor Bai. You got a couple there, huh?
Yep.
Oh, and library.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to start with TAB. So TAB just wants to thank us, and they appreciate working with us and think that they're a very vital part of our city. And let's see, they appreciate our commitment to Vision Zero, and they believe that this is an ongoing commitment, not a one-time commitment. They want us to explore the nexus between land use policy and transportation matters. They want us to look at new parking management and transportation with denser mixed use neighborhoods and less dedicated parking. They would like us to invest in and support multimodal networks, or to increase those multimodal networks. transportation funding is one of the big things that they want us to start looking at, seeing as at this last election it was not supported by the voters statewide, and looking at some alliances with RTA, which is the Regional Transportation, now I've lost it.
Authority.
Authority, thanks. They want us to also start looking at some like what they quote unquote called meaningful parking. So they think that underpriced parking around the city draws in more cars. And they want us to access the management parking strategy, start working with that further. Then they suggested that we implement some changes around it. So to reduce parking minimums for both new and existing developments. They want us to update or replace the neighborhood parking programs and make it more flexible or equitable. And then combine transportation demand management and the access management parking strategy with penalties for failure to meet the program goals. So that's tab.
All right.
Downtown Boulder. Kept theirs very short and sweet, so I'm just kind of going to read it off because they basically organized it very cleanly. So they wanted to thank us, and they also wanted to say that they supported the implementation of the downtown retail strategy for 2019, and the things that they would like to see or their goals for 2019 would be the continued implementation of retail strategy action steps, including possible bid expansions and creation of affordable retail space. They would like to partner with CU and city staff to ensure strong transit connections between downtown and University Hill to capitalize on new hotel development on the Hill. They would like to participate in the planning of future development of the East Bookend, including improved pedestrian access between the civic area and the commercial district, and advocating for effective parking policies. They would like to engage with City Council further, and they would like to advance innovative downtown access and mobility strategies. And the last thing they'd like for 2019 is to maintain the CAGID facilities and improve their user experience. And the last one I have is the library. So the libraries was not quite the standard letter. Theirs was more of a takeaway from our last study session that we had with them. So they would like to thank council for acknowledging that the library is underfunded, but that it is one of our crown jewels. And then another takeaway that they have is that they know that we're going to be doing the professional polling for the funding of the library. Another takeaway is one of the big things that I think they heard from council was the education of the citizens about the long-term funding for the library's maintenance. Determining city ballot initiative for 2019. We had discussed putting that on the ballot. Mm-hmm. And then some of their goals for the next 2 to 3 years that they would like to see is the opening of the North Boulder Library branch, a larger makerspace and expansion of Building 61 program, supporting services to Gun Barrel residents in the form of Corner Library pilot project, utilizing the methodology that proved successful in North Boulder, funding and completed analysis of the main library campus in North Boulder, institute a pilot program to activate the Canyon Theater to a goal of 80% utilization with necessary variances and adjustments to support mixed usage and programming. And last is the execution of the 2020 strategy technology plan.
Excellent. Thank you. Yep. Any questions for Mayor Bai? Hot dog. All right, I have 2 questions for council related to your reports from your boards and commissions. The first one, I wonder if it might be helpful for boards and commissions to know your thoughts. I have a sense that you prefer it when they answer your questions, or the free form, they kind of give you what is useful to them is cool. Did you want to just have any general thoughts and feedbacks on that for next year? Yep, Sam?
I think answering questions first is probably a good place to start. We welcome any thoughts that they have, I think, so if they want to go free form afterwards, that's also fine in my opinion, but I would like to start with the question answering because it's very helpful to get things kind of in the same format between boards.
Okay, anyone feel differently in addition? Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, I agree with that. And we asked, Mary and I formed the questions as a retreat committee, but we asked the questions for a specific reason, because the purpose of the retreat is to help us plan our our work plan for 2019. And so we very specifically said, what would you like us to, how are we doing so far? And,
Right.
and among our priorities, what are the highest, and how do you think we should accomplish those? And some boards and commissions did a really great job of answering that question, which I think was going to be very helpful for our retreat in a week and a half. Some were rather parochial in their responses, and while they had interesting responses, may not have been directly helpful for the retreat. So I agree with Sam. I think maybe next year for the retreat, we can say, please answer these questions, and then if you have anything else to say, add it at the end. That doesn't mean it's less important. It's just, I think it would be helpful if more of the boards and commissions had answered the questions that we'd posed.
And do you feel like you made that case in your outreach to them? The purpose of this specifically is to help us develop our work plan for 2019?
Apparently not sufficiently.
Okay, so maybe a little work there. Yep. Aaron?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said, but it is important to have that after section, because this is oftentimes the only chance a board has to communicate with us. So if they have something burning that they need to get off their chest, then definitely include it, but please answer the questions first. Yeah.
Okay. If they have something burning, maybe then answer the questions.
Yeah, some of them didn't even begin to start answering.
Okay. Anything else on that? All right. Then my second question is, now that you've reviewed and heard the range of things that are out there, it sounded to me like a lot of that was pretty consistent with some of the topics that Jane has already summarized that are on the work plan and your current priorities, and maybe some of the things that you all have identified as additional priorities. Did you hear anything or see anything where you're like, wow, that's not on our radar, but maybe it needed to be? Yep, Sam, and then Aaron? Lisa?
Well, I think occupancy limits is a political question, and I personally feel like the place to settle political questions really is at the ballot box. And so I would put out there that I'm not so excited about having HAB do the study on occupancy limits. However, I thought the tiny homes was interesting, and I think there's, a lot of education that needs to be done of me and maybe others on council about how tiny homes could integrate with mobile home parks, about how they can integrate with homeless services. And there's some interesting projects other cities have taken on around doing those kinds of things, doing those kinds of clever integrations of multiple goals at once and using tiny homes as a tool. So my thoughts around what we heard from HAB were that I'm more interested in the tiny homes if they're going to do a study session. But I think we expressed at our study session with HAB that we really wanted advice on our work plan items as well. So anything that's touching housing that really is already on the work plan, we want to make sure that they're prioritizing getting us feedback on those so that we can get feedback from the community and from them.
Could I segue on that?
Yep,
Or maybe
same
something
point,
Mary wants to before we all jump the queue and focus on HAB? You want to go first, or do you want me?
So I would echo that, and I would just say that I feel like the tiny homes could be teed up as part of the manufactured housing strategy, and that would be a good place for it. And then I also just wanted to say, kind of similar to the point that Lisa made earlier about another board, is that emphasis on advisory. And I think going off on their own projects, that's kind of policymaking, and that's not their role.
Okay.
So can I follow up on that? I actually met with a member of the Housing Advisory Board yesterday, and I did talk about the occupancy limits issue. And this is, it's a new board, and maybe we didn't provide them with adequate direction when we first formed them, 9 months ago, and they went off, God bless them, in lots of different directions. And then we had to sit down with them a couple, 2-3 months ago, and maybe narrowed their focus to 2 or 3 or 4 things that were consistent with the work plan. And then when I saw that that the occupancy limits was yet again on their list of things they'd really like to delve into, I had a discussion with one of the members of the board and said, as Sam indicated, this is a political question, and I think it's not on sensitive political questions like occupancy, it's probably not particularly helpful for our boards to get out in front of us. If and when we want to tackle an issue like that, we will undoubtedly go to the appropriate board and say, can you do some community engagement? Can you tell us what your big brains think about this? But that's one that I think is not on our list, and I think we want our boards to kind of to advise us on the things that are in our work plan rather than going off on new ones, particularly the ones that are pretty sensitive.
Okay. You also on housing, Lisa? Yep, go ahead.
So I agree with what everybody said so far. But the other thing is we did just have a discussion with HAB, and part of it was to thank them for their service and their enthusiasm and all of their work and stuff, but to please follow our direction a little more. And one thing that popped out at me in their letter was the Housing Advisory Board would not seek staff support or additional resources in pursuit of fact-finding on this study topic. And I guess the way I look at it is that, well, maybe council wants to have a discussion of not using staff, but staff is paid, and I would think most of our staff is very experienced in what they're doing, and that you might want to tap their knowledge. And so it makes me a little uncomfortable with them. I don't know if they heard us at our last meeting. And so I think that needs to be reiterated, that they need to work closely with staff. And I know what we heard from staff before was that they can't have a board that's going in 20 different directions and be efficient.
Okay, excellent. Aaron, you were up next.
Yeah, and I'll start by a little HAB input.
Okay.
I think they did make it clear that they're planning on focusing on our work plan, and I appreciated that. So, I mean, I understood that as their letter is saying, we get it, we'll keep working on what you care about. We do have a couple ideas, and here we're putting it out there in case you're interested. And I appreciate that they're trying to innovate. So I hope that they'll continue to have some time to work on some of ideas that they have. I agree with the prioritization of the tiny homes. I think that has the most promise in the short term.
Okay.
And could I just add on the tiny homes, I think they could also be considered under ADUs and things like that, so.
I'm going to come back and ask Jane about all these things, tiny home-wise, in a minute.
So I did, there were a couple that I was going to say, that, and which I already mentioned before, but I'll just say again from the letters that I was reading, that I'd really love for us as part of our large lots project to take BOZA up on the willingness to help. So if maybe staff we can work in some more engagement with BOZA, I thought that sounded like a great idea.
And I agree, and I actually included it as part of my my homework as something that I thought that was really worthwhile to consider.
Cool.
I have one more, but if, yeah. And the other one was just to make sure that the bias-motivated crimes ordinance stays on our schedule. Because it was a smaller item, so I didn't mention it in my letter or anything, but I know they've been working on it. I do want to hope and make sure that that does come to us in this first half of the year when it's ready.
Okay.
So Jane, do you have any thoughts on that? Or is that...
You might.
There's a study session scheduled, I believe, on all of the HRC recommendations to get council guidance. There's more than just the bias crimes, there's other ones. So we've put together a single study session on just those things, and I don't remember the date.
Okay, but within the next...
Within the next 2 quarters.
2 quarters, okay.
Before you leave for break.
Okay.
Before break, there's a study session that you think is fully committed to addressing several things from HRC.
Yes.
And if I can just finish it, and if we do want to move forward with the bias-motivated crimes, would there still be time to do it in 2019 with that? Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
It's February 26th.
There you go.
Fantastic. Yep. Mary, same point.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed in the letter that I wanted to add, also I included in my homework, was a desire on behalf of the HRC to hold human services community summits. And that perhaps could be added to that February 26th meeting.
Okay.
I took that, I did not have a chance to talk to any of the HRC members, but I took that to mean that it was something along the lines of the community speak out that was held. last year, 2 years ago. So where they just open it up to the community, come and talk to them. I thought that was a good idea.
Right. Erin, were you done? Okay, fantastic. Yep, Sam?
So I just wanted to return to RAB for a little bit and say, the Water Resources Advisory Board has some of the most technically gifted people in Boulder who serve on our boards and commissions. And I want to say that I appreciate that service and that it's a very specialized service that advises us in public works in a really important way. Yet at the same time, all our boards have to recognize that part of the reason that we got elected to council is we have to balance the different perspectives that we get. And so, while I appreciate the input that I don't think RAB liked that we did a 500-year flood mitigation, I think because there were so many people downstream and because it pulled so many additional people out of the floodplain, that was a balancing act that we felt like we needed to make. And so when we don't take a board's advice, it's not necessarily that we don't see the merit in the position that they're telling us. It's just that we have other folks telling us other things at the same time. And so it's all a big balancing act. So I just wanted to say to RAB, we didn't do this because we were ignoring your advice. We did what we did because it was a compromise of a bunch of different interests.
And just, Sam, do you feel like at the time that was made clear? Or do you think maybe if you were a RAB member watching that conversation, you didn't catch that part about appreciating the input but balancing it?
Well, I tried to say something there then, but maybe it didn't get across, and I had a conversation with at least one other RAB member in the week following to try and get across the point that it was balancing. And, you know, one of the difficulties with an issue that's got that much focus on it is it's hard always to be able to say something to each one. So, but it's very appreciated what RAB does for us.
Okay. Hold on, Bob, and then Lisa.
Yeah, just to answer your question to Sam, I think I couldn't help but observe that the boards that we've interacted with a fair bit recently, like the library and open space and transportation, seemed to be a rather cheery lot, got a lot of attention, and was appreciative of the interactions we had and the fact that we were taking their advice seriously. And I think in lesson learned maybe on CU South is, while I think we all did very much respect the technical advice provided by RAB, I think if I had to do it over again, I would have had RAB sitting with us so they could participate with us in the decisions and understand some of the balancing, economic and political balancing that we had to do, and maybe we didn't bring them in as firmly as we should have and let them participate in those really tough decisions.
Yeah, excellent. Lisa, and then Mary, and then we should probably...
So I just want to end, and I think one of this council and maybe previous councils' interest has been that we do encourage board interaction. And so, you know, since RAB, you know, advises planning board, we want them to interact with planning board. Transportation Advisory Board interacts with planning board. It's good for them to have meetings. So, and there's a lot of different boards, DAB, the Design Advisory Board, things like that, that are really important that we have this cross-fertilization and ideas. And I think, you know, it's happening in a lot of our boards where, you know, there'll be a meeting between two boards, and that's always very, I think, useful because each one kind of dabbles in the other one work.
Right.
And so the more that they can cross-pollinate their ideas, the better it is, so.
Excellent. All right, Mary, last thought on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I too appreciate RAB's work, and this is how much I appreciate them. I listened to the entirety of the tape of that evening's meeting, so it wasn't like, it didn't take it seriously. I did want to add a couple more things, comments with respect to Boza's letter. Another idea that they presented that I thought was worth consideration was to track ADU inquiries as well as applications. And I thought that was a really good idea in terms of, you know, what it might give us some insight into what we might not have gotten right in the ordinance, the inquiries portion of it. And then planning board had two suggestions that I thought were notable. One was the expansion of the notification to residents and businesses, that is the people that are leasing or renting, and then the development of a neighborhood meeting template for applicants. I thought was also a really good suggestion.
Mary, I think I heard you say one more thing from planning board, and that was it was some sort of, I don't know, they didn't use the word heat map, but some sort of development map, right, to show development areas or development. It's a dashboard.
No, well, it was planning board suggested a dashboard of infrastructure, the status of infrastructure.
I thought that was a good idea, too.
Okay. Lisa, last thought?
And so I was going to bring up EAB, and I thought a lot of their ideas, while they're not, I would put them under our climate commitment. I think they were outstanding. And, this is a really very active board coming up with good ideas. I like this whole idea about developing a urban heat island strategy. And they may want to work with planning board to see how they might implement that. Likewise, they want to conduct a stormwater management study. And so this would be another cross-fertilization where they could work with RAB. And then develop a native planning strategy. They could work with open space on that. So I think they're, and then air quality, they could work again with TAB and our sustainability. And anyway, there's a lot of places, boards that they should be putting these ideas in, I think.
Okay, excellent. Jane, I want to ask you a couple questions. Some council interest and enthusiasm around tiny homes, and one suggestion was incorporating it as part of the conversation on manufactured housing. Is that a huge expansion of that scope, just so we can plan for our conversation around that at the retreat? Is that a big addition?
I need to ask Kurt.
Kurt, okay. Kurt? Here you go, darling.
Hi, Kurt Fernhauer, Director of Housing and Human Services. So in listening to the input around that, I do think it is an increase to the scope of that project because it is quite different. We haven't really done any engagement with the community around that yet, where we have with the mobile home strategy. The other thing that I would add, which we're trying to balance in housing, is we have certain housing initiatives that we're working on, but many of the planning initiatives involve housing. The large lots, the community benefits, a lot of the zoning things that you're talking about, there's work associated with that, and we're a little uncertain about what the scope of that will be as those projects develop. So I'm also a little wary about committing to something that I'm not sure that we can probably accomplish in 2019.
Yes, I don't need for you to commit to it now, but if council wanted to prioritize this at the retreat, they need to know that it is adding in the tiny homes increases the scope of that and then would have some substantial work plan consequences, yeah?
Yeah, and we can think about that more between now and the retreat if you would like us to, yeah.
Fantastic.
And Kurt, maybe you could think about it in two ways. I think I heard somebody say part of the mobile home strategy. Other people have said maybe part of the large lot strategy. So maybe you can have an opinion about which one of those would slot into better.
And I would just say that I took a quick look at a few case studies of these being done in other parts of the country, and they are really their own thing. There have been some people who have looked at how do you integrate them in a mobile home context, but there's also a whole bunch of them that don't have anything to do with mobile homes per se, and you have ones with foundations and then ones with wheels, and so even those are treated differently. So just a comment that I think it could be bigger scope.
Yeah, I would say I would view it as a project on its own.
come back with more thoughts in case we have questions at the retreat. Thank you, Kurt. Jane, the other suggestion was just sort of working with BOZA on the large lots conversation. Does that change anything in terms of workload that we need to know, or is that just for you to have?
No, we can totally do that.
Okay, fantastic. And then bias-motivated crimes, you said is coming. This idea of tracking ADU inquiries in addition to applications, is that a substantial addition to work, or is that something that you could just do?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
So here's the thing, like lots of people in the planning department get phone calls, and we'd be having to tell every single person to track it. I just don't know if it's an administrative burden or not, but how about if we report back on that one?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And then how about expanding the notification to businesses?
Yeah, that one is one that I think it's fair for us to look into, but I think it's actually a very big deal.
Okay.
And that it's going to implicate the city attorney's office in a major way, because they're going to have to write the ordinance and help us figure out how we know who every leasehold interest is within the area. So it seems like a pretty big addition.
Does it make sense to give just that a little bit more thought and give council some more information at the retreat?
Sure, yes.
Okay. Tom, that's cool for you? Okay, fantastic. And then the meeting template, that sounded like that might be a big additional work thing.
It is. Here's the thing about it, is that what I think that the planning board is suggesting is that every time there is a development that impacts a neighborhood, that a staff member needs to go to a meeting hosted by the developer and present a neutral-ish statement about what's going on. That increases the staff workload significantly. And it's evening meetings generally, which would end up resulting in staff members having more comp time that they would need to take and less time doing other work. So I feel like it's got a component to it of, do we have enough staff to even make that happen? So it would take a lot of study.
Okay. And then the dashboard, similarly proposed by planning board?
I don't know what the dashboard is. Does anybody in the audience know what the dashboard is?
Staff, anyone? Okay.
My sense from reading the letter was that it was a dashboard that tracked infrastructure capacity in different parts of the city. And so the thought was maybe when more development is going in, what impact would it have on sewer, water? But I don't know that, I think staff already has to do some of that work on a project by project basis. So.
Yep. Yes, yep. Tell us what you know.
Chris Meschuk from Planning. So Sam, you're right. Typically, we track infrastructure capacity and we do that build-out analysis as a part of each department that has a master plan. We do it as a part of their master planning process, and then we update that. That's part of the reason why the planning department coordinates master plans in the CIP, is that important link between infrastructure and growth of the community and making sure that we're tracking with each other. So I think it'd be helpful for us to chat with the planning board a little bit more to understand what they'd like to see in a dashboard, and then we can understand what the best way is to try and present that, and whether that's an online dashboard or is a part of the annual CIP process. I think it'd be great for us to learn a little bit more first.
Great, thanks, Chris. All right, and then Jane, the last one was just the great ideas that Lisa was talking about from the Environmental Advisory Board that seemed to maybe, at least in her mind, sort of dovetail with the climate commitment. Is that how you see those?
Yes,
Okay.
I do see them that way, and I feel like the Environmental Advisory Board has a good relationship with our staff, and that they should be working together to figure out what the priorities are. They named at least 6 priorities, and I don't think we can get all of those done in a year. And so what I would actually ask is that staff work with the EAB board to talk about all the things that are on their agenda and help them prioritize what they want to get done
Okay.
in the climate area. But all of those were very worthy.
Fantastic. And then maybe they could also take Lisa's ideas, whatever their priorities are, meet with any other boards that might want to share the interest.
Yeah,
Okay.
that definitely is important, that we include them in input that they can have with other boards, yes.
Fantastic. Excellent. Okay. So with that, I'm prepared to wrap up the conversation on boards and commissions. Do y'all want to stretch your legs for 5 before we jump into the next bit? Sure. But like seriously, 5, not council 5, like actual 5 human, regular people minutes. Biological minutes. Go meet your biological needs for 5 minutes. 7:42 people on the Apple Watch, 7:42. Go. Okay. All right. Bob, Mary Lisa, let's go, let's go, let's go. Okay. So, if you're following along on our handy-dandy agenda, we are now at the time we're talking about the discussion of council hotline emails and priorities. Lynette had put together in that packet that she sent out, she had sort of tabulated the individual ideas and additions that you all had provided in your emails in order to sort of give us a way to focus. So if you wanted to flip to that, it's the second page. It's behind the existing priority areas table. And basically what we have is a list there on the left of the individual things that you all have suggested, and then a box where there was some consistency where multiple members of council had identified an interest. And then there's a middle page there with a lot of stuff that Lisa wants to get done before she, heads on out. And then on that last page, there are a couple additional items that had multiple folks interested in them. What I thought we could do with our time together tonight in preparation for the retreat is maybe starting with the items where there's more than one of you interested in this item, check in with Jane first to see what staff is already doing, if anything, on that topic. Because if that satisfies you, then that's one less thing we need to spend time on at the retreat. And if it doesn't satisfy you, would love just to hear you briefly share with us why not and what you were hoping to achieve on that topic. Again, just to help us focus our conversation when we get to the retreat. Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you, yep.
And I appreciate Lynette for putting this all together. It was not easy because we're all communicating a little bit differently. But like the first topic, homelessness and homelessness strategy, it's in my list, but,
Yeah.
So
It's an imperfect tool.
I think we're going to come together.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. Yeah. The item, just starting there at the top, on account of it's at the top, and there were at least three of you who were interested in it. Homelessness and the homelessness strategy update. Jane, what's the haps?
So on January 15th, which is a week from today, there'll be a Knot of Five to talk about severe weather sheltering. I think that conversation will be helpful to direct staff to come back with further information on that topic with some urgency. We talked about it CAC because it's the winter. We also have an update scheduled in March where we've been doing research and background work with our partners on homelessness to talk about the effectiveness of the homelessness strategy that was adopted a year ago. So we've got some touch points that are coming up in the next 2 months.
Is that adequate, or did you need something else, Mayor Bai?
I actually had wanted to jump on this, and I was going to send an email, but seeing as we're discussing it here, Cindy Carlisle and I walked out of the building after a meeting a couple weeks ago, and there was a woman sitting out here, and her partner had gone to the hospital, and she was sitting there with 2 pups, and she was not allowed into the shelter because of those pups. And so I would just like to look at having severe weather shelter include animals, just maybe even have just a section or part of a room for those, because a lot of our homeless do have dogs. Maybe not so much cats, but definitely dogs. And I don't think that, these were honest to God puppies, and whether or not she should have had the dogs or not is not the question I want to look at. It's the fact that she did, and those animals were also in danger of freezing because it was a really cold night. So just if we could look at staff and adding animals into the discussion.
Yep, absolutely.
Council, anything else then? Are you satisfied with that, or we need to do more different? Jane, Mary?
No, and I just wanted to let the rest of my colleagues know at CAC we had a discussion also about what I feel is a gap in how we're serving homeless folks, and that is the disappearance of what I thought was BOHO, but since then I've had clarification, which is Boulder County Cares, which is something that the shelter used to do, but they stopped doing that last year, and I have not reached out to Greg yet to find out why. But what Boulder County Cares did was do street outreach, and my concern is severe weather shelter will not serve the folks that will not come in out of the cold no matter what. And that's what Boulder County Cares used to do, is to make sure that those folks were okay. So.
And so after Mary mentioned that at CAC, I told Kurt and our entire staff about that, and they'll be looking into it.
Okay. Yep.
If I can just say, I appreciate it being put on the agenda for the 15th, and I look forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else on that? All right. Long's Garden Preservation, looks like several of you are interested in making that an additional project. Jane, is that underway in any way already?
It is underway, and we reported to council on it about 3 weeks ago at our, maybe 4 weeks ago at our study session. The Open Space Department met with the owners of the property to talk about what their needs are, and council asked us to continue that conversation, which we are. Once we come up with some understanding about what it is that owners are hoping to achieve and the cost, which we're doing an appraisal, I believe, on it now. Dan? Don't get up.
We're actually having another meeting with the owners and representatives of the owners, and we're going to be talking about the appraisal process and whether it's a renewal or a completely new appraisal due to the changed conditions on the property from the past 5 years.
Yeah. So then after we get that appraisal, we'll be able to understand the cost, and we'll work with the city attorney's office to develop a possible purchase scenario, but we'll have to figure out where the money is coming from, and so that will be a topic for later in this year, hopefully around the May timeframe.
Okay. Mirabai, you need something different or an addition?
I just wanted to add my name under that. It was under one of those things I assumed we were working on.
Okay, it's
I'm
fine,
on board with that one for sure.
And you would want to add Cindy.
Okay. So I guess, but my question for you all is, based on what you've heard from Jane, this one's good and underway? Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Dan. And then I'm going to skip items that only have one X for now and focus on the ones where there's multiple ones. And then if you want to circle back to any of them, you let me know. So now I'm on item 5 in the list, prioritize preservation of existing market rate affordable housing. Several of you have indicated that that's an additional project. Jane, what's going on there?
So this is hard for me to answer because honestly, we want to do this all the time. I don't know that we actually have a project or a program that does this. So, Kurt, if I'm wrong, come up and tell us what we're doing.
Or if she's right, you could tell us what we're doing too.
So first of all, Jane's never wrong.
Good answer.
So I'm planning on talking a little bit more about this at the retreat. But just to, so preservation is part of our strategy in housing, and it's something that we work on all the time. Just to throw out a couple numbers, over the last 20 years, for every 100 new housing units that are created in the city of Boulder, residential units, 16 of them will be permanently affordable. An additional 13 units will be created through preservation. So out of every 100 units that are created, 39% sort of are created as, or turned into affordable housing. Over the last 5 years, the preservation number is actually more than double that. So a significant amount of our funding is currently going into preservation projects, not just new affordable housing projects. We work very closely with Boulder Housing Partners as sort of our key partner around that initiative. And I think part of the challenge of why it gets attention in venues like this is because there's not a lot of fanfare around it, like there is for new projects. We're currently working on a preservation project with, right now, that may occur in the next couple of months. We completed one a couple last year, a couple of the year before that. There's been at least 2 preservation projects every year for the last 5 years. Yep.
And then Bob.
And are these are apartment buildings, most of them?
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
And so we're getting hundreds, basically, of units that are being preserved.
That's correct. And with our middle income strategy, we'll probably be looking at that for home ownership units as well. The key is actually money and balancing the amount of resources that we can prioritize for that.
Okay. Bob?
So just adding to what Kurt said, one of our 14 priorities, which we are going to be tackling this year, is the middle income shared equity program, which does a lot towards preservation because it is a deed restriction program. And we're going to be talking about numbers when we talk about this in February or March. But I think some of the numbers that Kurt mentioned could be really bumped up if this program gets going and is as big as Sam and I hope it is.
Okay. Sam?
And I just wanted to ask a question about Tantra. Was that ownership or was that all rental?
That was all rental.
That was all rental as well. So we've got like Osage, Thunderbird, Tantra. Those were ones that are
Right.
Nest.
And there was a couple just north of town that were also purchased last year.
Just north of downtown.
Yep.
Okay.
So, I was just going to say, it seems like things are moving along somewhat in this direction. I would add also that with the opportunity zone discussion, one of the things that we were talking about was making it such that existing market rate housing couldn't be demolished as part of putting new housing in. And I think if we find a solution in the opportunity zone for that, we might look at other places in town to apply it. But I also want to agree with Bob that I have high hopes that over time, the middle income could just have 10s to 50s a year of homes that have deed restrictions on them.
So, Council, you feel like this one is moving along and we don't need to talk about it more at the retreat? Satisfied? Okay. Thank you, Kurt. You probably don't need to go very far, though. All right. Next item then, item number 6 on your list also has at least 3 folks who are interested in it. Mechanisms to preserve or create affordable commercial space and small local business stabilization. Are you doing so on that?
Yeah, so the Community Vitality Department is working on this as part of the retail strategy that we're doing a study on. One of the things that we've talked about is trying to define what is affordable commercial space, and then once we have figured out what it is, how it is that we encourage it or subsidize it and whatever. So that is part of the retail strategy that will be coming to council later in the year after we get the study back.
Okay. Council questions? Bob?
I'd like to channel Jill a little bit here because I know one thing that Jill cared about was not only preserving and creating affordable commercial space, but also streamlining our processes for small businesses to start, small retail businesses to start in Boulder. One of the most frequent complaints that we hear, through Downtown Boulder Partnership, through 29th Street is that we as a city, because we have so many layers of requirements, that we make it really, really challenging for small businesses. And we have lots and lots of examples to get going. And not only do we have lots of requirements, but we also have lots of departments they have to deal with that many businesses don't feel are very well coordinated. So they have to get a liquor license, and they have to get a planning board approval, and they have to get this approval and that approval. And they may have to deal with 3 or 4 or 5 different departments. And sometimes those requirements are the same, and sometimes they're in conflict. And so one of the things that Jill had as one of her parting shots was to suggest that we come up with ways to streamline and coordinate retail space procurement and new small business launching. I don't know if this fits into that or if that's a whole separate project, but that's something that I think is worthy of us talking about at some point in time.
Yeah, it's clearly related, intimately related. We want to do a better job of streamlining all of the things that we work on. In a way, this feels like it would be a separate project, but one that could fall quickly on the heels of the results of the retail strategy. And it seems to me like maybe one that we could get some consultant help on, because our staff is stretched pretty thin in all of these areas, but maybe a consultant could understand or help us understand where we could streamline things. So this is one that I don't think we can get started on right away, but that maybe halfway through the year, when we hear more about that retail strategy, it could be something that comes to the top.
No, that's great. And I think, whether you use a consultant or our existing staff, this is one area where cities all over the country deal with this, and some have done a good job of perfecting or improving their systems. And so we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I think we just find the cities that have done a better job of this, and we just emulate them.
Yeah. Copy their wheel. Okay. So based on what you've heard, are you satisfied that this one is underway? Do we need more conversation about it at the retreat? Silence is construed as we're cool. Okay. Then moving on to item 7, Diagonal Plaza. Looks like a bunch of you want to do something about that. Jane, what are you doing about that?
So the council has asked us to take a look at the BC 1 and 2 zone districts, and we are doing that, and we'll be coming back with some ordinances around it. In addition, the Community Vitality Department and the Planning Department have reached out to the property owners in that area, and will, I believe, be meeting with them to discuss what possible plans there might be. So we are trying to work closely with the property owners to see how we can move forward.
Okay. Council, those of you who have X's here spoke to this in your letters. Were you expecting or needing something other than what Jane just described on Diagonal Plaza?
No.
Yep. No, we're good?
No.
Good? Okay, fantastic. Then the next item, item number 8, enhance existing ordinance to better address bias-motivated crimes. I think we already talked about that one, so we're satisfied that it's coming at you soon here, it sounds like. And then civic use pad, item number 9.
So we have a proposed management agreement that is in the hands of the property owner, and once we hear back from them, we'll be bringing it, if it meets our needs, forward to council. So our hope had been to get this to council in the March-April timeframe.
Okay, yep.
Jane, can you just refresh my memory on when is that, our deadline? It's like 2020?
It's a year from now.
Yeah, 2020.
2020.
Yep, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Satisfied with how that one's going? Do we need more discussion? Okay. Jane, sounds like you're on a lot of this. How about the next item, CU South Annexation? We talked a little bit about that. What else?
That's coming to council on February 5th for our next check-in.
Okay. Council, do you need anything else on that, or you just want to see how that thing shakes out there in February? Good? All right. Then next item is opportunity zones to include East Boulder Sub-Community Plan and redraw boundaries. We talked a little bit about that already. Do you need any more information from Jane about that? Okay, that's coming. All right. Then if you'll skip to not the next page that has a long list there, but there are a couple items on the back page that there is more than one of you. We'll circle back to the others here in a minute.
If I could just
Yeah.
say, so you come back under 13, manufactured housing strategy should include and accelerate rent stabilization. I meant to put that under my, and so you can put another X there.
Okay, why don't we just talk about that one while we're there then? Manufactured housing strategy, including accelerating rent stabilization ordinance. Jane, you have that underway?
I don't know the answer to that.
Tom, do you have that underway? Kurt, does someone have that underway?
Yeah, so that is part of the scope of what we're looking at with the manufactured housing strategy. And we're actually working with getting history and documentation on what the rents have been at the different communities and what those increases look like, as well as feedback from the residents as well, which would help inform that discussion.
So that'll be part of that on council conversation on manufactured housing strategy? Okay.
Yeah, that will be coming in
26.
the first quarter, yeah.
Do you have the whole calendar memorized? You're really good with the dates.
If it has to do with manufactured housing.
Things my brain is locked tight.
Fantastic. So Mary and Lisa, you were the ones who had X there. Are you satisfied that that's coming to you?
Yeah, no, and we've been in conversations with staff, and so we, at least for my putting it in, I just wanted to make sure that
Check and double check?
Yep.
Satisfied? Okay, fantastic.
I just want to add one.
Please.
So specifically, what I had in mind when I put that in there was an ordinance that we had had some discussions about last year. So, and that was rent caps. So that was what I had in mind.
Is that part of the strategy? Okay, yep. So it sounds like that's coming at you. All right. All right, now do the thing I said before. Skip the next page, which we'll come back to.
But just, I thought I would mention,
Oh, good grief.
I would put an X in 14 as well, and I
14,
suspect
okay.
that Cindy would as well.
Okay. So let's talk about that one.
Yeah, because I just.
You're not going to let me skip the page and circle back. It's going to be fine.
Okay.
We'll just do it your way. It's fine. 14, apparently. A lot of people excited about it, which is evaluating potential increase to inclusionary housing percentage in the opportunity zones. Jane, is that part of one or the other conversations that you already have underway?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. You satisfied with that? Okay, fantastic. All right, so we're good there. Then on the third page, there are two items that had multiple X's. Want to check in with those first before we go back to the others. Item 32, the Hill Hotel project, Hill improvements, was also mentioned by the Uni Hill Group. What's going on there, Jane?
It will be brought to council on January 22nd.
Okay. Is that adequate? It's coming at you. All right. And then how about Macy's redevelopment?
Macy's has submitted a site plan, and it will go through the process.
Yep.
So council doesn't need to talk about that more because it's going down another,
I don't think we can.
okay. Oh, it's quasi judicial. Okay. All right. All right. Now, do the thing that you were doing anyway. Go back to the first page. I did ask staff to take a quick look at this list and give us a sense of how many of the items that were on here are underway. And it sounds like a fair number are. And now that I see that some of you might have wanted to X some of these items anyway, let's go back to the ones that just have one X and see what the scoop is there. So item number 3, encourage more housing along 28th and 30th Streets in industrial areas. Jane, is that part of something that you're already doing?
I guess the answer is yes, but the way that this is written, it feels unclear to me, and I don't know what is intended.
Aaron, can you help us understand what you at least intended there?
Sure. I mean, we don't have to talk about this a long time. It's one of these are two items that were teed up from the comp plan process as future work plan items, and I think they're pegged for like 2020 or 2021, about having more housing in the 28th and 38th Street corridors and in industrial areas. And I was just sort of registering that this would be my preferred approach to dealing with the issues around the opportunity zone, would be to move these projects forward. I realize I'm not in the majority on that. I just threw that in there.
Well, wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Can I weigh in?
Yes, please.
I mean, we talked about this in the comp plan, and if we had talked before here, I would have put this on. I mean, I think one of our, at least my goals, is to get a better balance between jobs and population. And if we're going to do that, then we need to take away some of the, or we need to rezone some of the commercial industrial land to residential or mixed use or something like that. So you're not alone. So, and actually, I put this down in 1999. So,
It was a Thursday.
no, it was
Tuesday.
actually a Monday.
Go ahead, Mary, and then Sam. Okay, Sam and then Mary.
Well, I was just going to point out that we had another point of these discussions, which was BC1 and BC2. As we look at that, there's typologies that are kind of weird. And so one of the things that we had teed up as part of this whole conversation and the work plan for the comp plan was to take a look at those zonings. It's hard to do rezonings, but it certainly seems like there's good enough reason to, and then we can have different mixes of housing and businesses. And I just want to make one last thing. I want to be careful about housing in industrial zones, because there are certain types of industrial uses that aren't really compatible with putting housing there, and we don't want to chase away all of our brewers and our coffee roasters and so on. So we need to be thoughtful about that piece of this.
And if I can just call up you real quickly, the way that the project was discussed, I mean, we put something in the comp plan about this, and it was very much keeping those balances in mind, you know, about putting in more mixed-use space, not just housing, but a little bit of neighborhood serving retail, things like that, while preserving those important uses. So it's definitely in the idea of the.
Okay. Mary, then I'll come back, Jane, to see if you think that it's part of the conversation that's already underway.
Yeah, so I think that this particular project, especially the areas that are within the Opportunity Zone along 28th and 30th Street, I would be thrilled if staff were looking at all of the suggestions that council has made with respect to the Opportunity Zone and which ones would accomplish what we're trying to accomplish in the best manner. And so I would put this in there as one of the things that staff could look at and say, hey, what we want to do is make sure that the Opportunity Zone lives up to its professed goals. And so this could be one of the strategies.
Okay. Based on that, Jane, does that sound like something that could roll into the Opportunity Zone conversation? Or is it bigger than that?
It's bigger than that. But a way that it rolls in, I think, is that in a couple of weeks, you'll be talking about sub-community planning. And one of the areas that I think you believe is a high priority is the East Boulder area. And so I feel like the way that you geographically define that East Boulder area will be the first step to doing a sub-community plan that ultimately may lead to a decision that that sub-community which includes a lot of industrial, needs to include residential as well. So I think you've got a first step ahead of you, but not code work coming up this year on this.
So, Council, does that mean you want to consider this as an additional work plan item at the retreat, or are you satisfied that it's coming maybe in pieces in the future?
There's just so much we can take on, but for me, this discussion is kind of frustrating because this 28th and 30th Street, these areas are places that many former councils have wanted to see a change.
Okay.
In the use.
We can talk about it at the retreat.
And so maybe we talk about it. Maybe we talk about it through opportunity zones. I don't know.
And we've also got the BC 1 and 2
And the BC
zone
1,
that you're
BC.
asking for mixed use in, and so that may help address it. So I feel like there's a couple of different ways that we're coming at it.
I just think, and maybe that would be something at the retreat. We were asking the planning staff, plus a lot of others, to do a lot, and so you can't keep squeezing it, and so maybe we need more people.
Okay. Sam or Aaron, did you want to weigh in on that before we move on?
Only that the ultimate outcome, I mean, we might be able to do something stopgap with BC 1 and 2 and get, part of what we want to get done there done as part of looking at that and bringing it out of the Opportunity Zone. But I think ultimately it's going to be a rezoning that's going to come from the comp plan, work plan, because it's going to create a new zone district most likely. If we do the different typologies the way that we had wanted to, we have shopping centers that are one typology and strip retail, which is a different typology. I don't think we can get that part done, but I think we could get some of the housing allowance done. But I'm going to look closer at the BC 1 and BC 2. But I talked to Chris. Chris, do you want to say something about this? Because I think it was at a CAC that you had talked about this.
Yeah, just real quick. I think this is a helpful conversation, and that's part of what we would like to try and do is hear the conversation tonight, and then, Lisa, I appreciate there is only so much we can squeeze out of our planning staff. So we'd like to bring options to the retreat on ways that we might be able to staff different initiatives and figure out what the phasing and timing is, because we can't probably do it all, but we'd like to see what we can get done, and the Opportunity Zone, has now triggered a bit of a different conversation, so we want to bring you options.
So if I might offer, I mean, maybe it sounds like there's some relatively broad interest in seeing more housing in these areas. So maybe that's a goal that we can work into these other projects that are already underway and see how we can incorporate that.
You're going to be busy between now and the retreat, huh? Yeah, okay.
That's just next week.
We're pretending it's really far away. Don't freak him out. Maybe he didn't realize that, Mary. Shh, don't draw attention. All right, I'm keeping that one then on the list of things that we can talk more about at the retreat. The next item is a city head tax. Are you working on that, Jane?
No.
Okay, so that would be a new item.
Yes.
Okay. Then we did that one, and then the last item on this page is item number 12, establish publicly administered social impact opportunity fund. Are you working on that?
Yes, Yvette has reached out to the Community Foundation to understand more about what this might look like, and we're seeking background information. I'm not sure we'll be able to establish it, but at least we're going to be trying to figure out how, and we'll bring information back to council when we know more.
Okay. Mary, is that satisfactory? So do we need to talk more about that at the retreat? Okay, cool. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Next page. All right. I'd like to do sort of, given the time, a speed round on some of these. Starting at the top, item 14 we did. Item 15, Jane, are you already working on define opportunity zone oversight metrics?
It's part of the work plan.
And council would do something with it in 2019, or it's farther out?
I hope that we're going to do something this year with it, but so there are different parts of the opportunity zone issues. So this is a reporting item. And so we're trying to figure out from other cities what kind of reporting they're doing and what kind of reporting would be impactful. And I know that Yvette has reached out to one of the senators who was a sponsor of this bill to find out more about what they were thinking with regard to metrics. So we're working on it, but it's not really part of the zoning stuff that we need to get moving on because of the moratorium. So it's on the work plan. It's just going to come in a different time frame, I think.
Okay. Mary, do you need to talk more about that at the retreat? Are you satisfied? Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right. Now, Lisa, you got a bunch of things here. What I want to do is go through them quickly and just hear which one staff's working on, and then we're not going to talk about them tonight. We'll just identify which ones we're going to talk about at the retreat, okay? Okay, cool. All right, Jane, are you working on city custodial workers?
In April of 2017, council asked us to make sure that all of our contract employees, including the city custodial workers, were paid a living wage. They are. I believe that this item was to bring them in-house. We are not working on that.
Okay, so if we want to talk about that retreat, it'd be a new item.
I'll bring it up at the retreat.
Fantastic, thank you, ma'am. Open space and mountain parks dedicated tax.
I'll bring it up under ballot issues.
Hold on, are you working on it already, Jane?
Yes, staff has heard from members of the community that they're interested in this, and so it's part of our considerations as we look toward the fiscal part of the open space master plan.
So do we need to talk about more of that at the retreat, or are you satisfied to know that they're on it?
With that.
Okay, fantastic. Next item, establish and seat a marijuana advisory board. You working on that?
Not really, no.
Okay.
So you remember the marijuana advisory panel is working, and they're supposed to bring back recommendations this year on how to institutionalize their function. So that is sort of under process through the MAP process.
And they're working on that. They have a meeting in March where they're going to explore that idea.
Looking for it, yeah.
Okay, so do you want to talk about it at the retreat, or you want to wait and see what shakes out of that when they come to you?
No, it's just a heads up.
Okay.
I'm going to be pushing it, and that I'm listening to what's coming out of MAP, and I've met with some of the members of MAP, so.
I may be biased, but I think they do fine work.
I think they do.
All right. Sister City patio and exhibits showing gifts received from sister cities. Is that something underway?
Yes, in fact, about a week or 2 weeks ago, several of us met with our consultants who are helping us figure out a way to show to exhibit the gifts that we've received. Our plan was to work with the Sister City Committee after we get more information, and I intend to reach out to the Sister City Committee of Council to figure out how they want to be involved in how we do the displays.
So are you satisfied, or you want to talk about that more?
Sounds excellent to me.
Excellent, fantastic. Reinstalling the front east-facing doors in the municipal building. Are you doing that?
We are sort of doing that because Lisa brought it up. I asked Michelle Crane to look into the cost of reinstalling the doors. We had thought about doing it with the remodel, but because we did not have sufficient funds to remodel this building the way we had hoped to, we deleted that. So we're going to be investigating further and bringing it back, and council can make a decision when we provide the information about the cost.
Satisfied with that?
Excellent.
Fantastic.
This is why I brought these up.
Okay, and we're just check marking them 8 ways from Sunday here. Harbeck House disposition?
So council was invited to a tour a couple of weeks ago and has received a couple of IPs on this item already. We're continuing to meet with the public and will be returning in the spring with a proposal based on public and board feedback.
Okay, cool.
Excellent.
Excellent. East Bookend project?
Yeah, we continue to work on it, but I would have to say that I feel like this one's been put on the back burner a little bit because of some of the other work that we've had. So we need to work with BMOCA to understand what their needs are. And we don't have a date to return to council on this one. So this might be one that we would schedule.
Okay. So do we need to talk more about that at the retreat and figure out how it would fit in?
No.
Okay.
But I'm specifically interested in the historic preservation elements, the band shell, the benches, and the trees that have been landmarked.
So is it safe to say, Jane, you're on it? You'll get it to council when you can?
Yeah.
Okay. San Lazaro Mobile Home Park annexation.
So the owners of this mobile home park have not applied for annexation, and it's not an enclave, so we can't annex it. We would, however, love to. It would be very costly, so I don't really know how to answer it. We're not doing anything on it. We're wishing we could.
Do you want to
Me
talk?
too, and I just brought it up so people don't forget it.
Okay. How about Hill Investment Working Group?
It's alive and well, and they'll be talking, or not talking, but maybe part of the presentation on June 22nd, or January 22nd.
Okay. You satisfied with that, Lisa? It's coming? All right. Landmarks and demolitions?
I don't know the answer to that.
What do you mean by that?
So I wrote a memo to planning staff and as part of large lots and just asked some questions about demolitions and they are working on it. It was a pretty long bunch of questions. I'm fine. They're working as hard as they can. It'll come back when they're ready to bring it back. I just put it in my list.
Awesome. All right. Decision tree on how and what information council receives.
So this one, I think, goes more with the process discussion that we should be having later.
Yep. Okay. Come back to that one. I will make a note. Continued strong support for our scientific and engineering base. I don't know what that means.
I wanted just to put it in there because it's a Boulder brand, and I think it's a really important economic function in our community. And recently, I learned that there's, let's say, a nonprofit that's a scientific organization that's a pretty important one that's adjacent to opportunity zones, and they could leave. And so we don't want them to leave. And so, anyway, that's something I should talk with Jane and Yvette about.
Okay. So we don't need to do anything about it at the retreat?
No,
Okay.
I'll just talk. I'll have coffee with them.
Cool. Coffee sounds great. Robust city-supported e-bike rebate program in 2019. Are you already on that?
I don't believe that we are, but it's a really interesting idea that I think our transportation team could be looking at.
Would you like to hear thoughts from the transportation folks at the retreat about that?
No, but yeah, they could give me a couple ideas. But
Okay.
I just think it was a very successful program when we had it. Was it 2 years ago, Jane? And I don't know if it requires coordination with the county, but I think it's a trend, and I think it's something that people are trying, and it's certainly something that would help decrease our greenhouse gas emissions.
So yes, you'd like some information at the retreat or just offline?
They can just tell me when they
Okay.
want.
Great. Checking in on the newly established ADU policy. Just want to sort of keep
Yeah, and
seeing how that's
we're
going.
already planning on doing
Yeah, we're
that.
planning to do that.
Okay. and checking in on the short-term rental policy.
Yes, we are planning on that as well.
Doing all the things. And checking in on the towing ordinance. Do you have a plan for that?
Yep.
Fantastic. You satisfied with all that, Lisa?
I'm very happy.
And update the towing ordinance to include licensing. Mary, that was yours. Is that something that's underway? Tom?
We're going to finish the first one first and then get to the second one.
That's a bold choice. Okay. Mary, do you want to talk more about that at the retreat? And how it might? Nope. Just let it lie until. Okay. And then how about reviewing the feasibility of community-wide eco-passes? Is that something that's underway?
Yeah, I believe that Go Boulder is always working on this.
Okay. Mary, do you need to know more about that?
Issue.
Go Boulder's working on it. No, I don't need. Okay. And then bilingual pay. Are you on that?
Yes, we have inquired of Longmont how they're doing it and the county. Once we get more information, we'll be working with our HR department to determine how we could establish such a policy.
Fantastic. Council, based on my note-taking, it sounds like of new ideas that we need to talk about at the retreat, there actually aren't that many that you're not already working on. I caught 3. And one of them maybe you're kind of working on, which is the 28th, 30th Street, maybe the city head tax, and then the custodial workers. Those seem to be the only actually new items that aren't in some way already incorporated into the work plan. Does that sound like what you heard? Okay. I'm going to come back to Bob's question about what we're going to do with these things later when we get to the agenda. So I'm done with those items unless anyone has anything else. Council, well done. Really thoughtful conversation, and your ideas were great. And Jane, never ceases to amaze me how your staff is already always doing all the things.
They're amazing.
They're amazing. We love them. All right. We're going to transition now to our next agenda item, which is a bundle of 2 things that maybe kind of go together and maybe kind of don't. First thing is you're going to hear from Sarah Huntley on the community engagement process, so she's going to give you an update there. And then process improvements. And my understanding is that process improvements is council process improvements and not community engagement process improvements. So those might have wanted to be 2 different agenda items. So we'll hear from Sarah first. Hi, Sarah. And then we'll come back and talk about council improvements. Okay?
Can I make a small oversight that Erin mentioned to me is we didn't talk about Cindy's letter that she sent with 3 items.
Oh.
So the 3 items that she mentioned were assistance for council, council's input on the city budget, and the city head tax. And the head tax is obviously on there in
Talked about that one.
the list, so it's the other 2.
Okay. Assistance for council, Jane, is that something that you've talked about or done anything about?
We have not done much work on it, but when we saw Cindy's letter, we are going to try to do some research to find out a little bit more about what some other cities might do. But it definitely is a budget item, as well as, and it, not an issue, but something that we would need to talk very seriously about with council with regard to how to operationalize something like that, because any of these folks would actually not report to council members. They would report to the city manager's office, and the council members would not be able to direct them to do work under the city charter. And so we would have to work out a way to understand what it is exactly the council members wanted, and, you know, to make sure that you are receiving what you want, but also not violating the city charter. So there's sort of policy issues involved with this particular item.
So harder than it sounds. Should we spend some time on that at the retreat? Couple minutes? Yep, okay. Tom?
So on the budget issue, the budget process is laid out in the charter, and I've communicated with Cindy. She's off, and so we're going to spend some time talking when she gets back about trying to explore what she's doing. But as she laid it out, I think it might require a charter amendment to have it, because the steps in the charter are the steps that are currently followed. It's pretty express, and there's no provision for council to be involved earlier than council's currently involved. So I'll explore what she's looking at and see if I can come with up advice, but my preliminary thought is it would require a charter change.
Okay, so do we need to talk about that at the retreat, or Rest of you, are you satisfied that Tom and Cindy are maybe going to sort it out offline? That's good. Okay, cool. Then I'm just, from our previous list, I'm just adding assistance for council to the items that will carry over to the retreat, and maybe they would go in the process bucket at the retreat. Well, maybe we'll talk about that later. All right, this time for sure, Sarah, you're up.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate your taking some time to talk about this issue tonight. I'm Sarah Huntley, the Engagement Manager for the city, and I've been asked to really frame this discussion on a limited focus, which is to talk about City Council engagement initiatives specifically. As you know, in November 2017, the city recommitted to effective engagement, and City Council adopted a framework, strategic framework with 2 goals to make engagement more meaningful and more inclusive. As council's part of that, we first acknowledge that lots of individual council members interact with the community in lots of effective ways right now. But council as a group asked staff to conduct 2 pilots designed to help community members who are not already connecting with council primarily to connect better with their elected officials. Those 2 pilots were a Chats with Council program and a remote council participation pilot. Tonight, we need to get some feedback from you, or at least tee up a discussion, perhaps for feedback at the retreat if you would prefer, on 4 questions. The first is, does council wish to continue Chats with Council in 2019? The second is, if council chats continue, how many sessions do you think would be appropriate given some of the lessons we learned from 2018? And are there specific segments of the community council would really like us to be reaching? The third is, are council members interested in participating in additional community engagement training, mostly in the context of these small group discussions that have been happening at council chats? And then lastly, is council interested in piloting additional forms of remote council participation in 2019? These are important questions for city staff because we would need to build out work plan items associated with them, as we wanted to get your guidance early in the year. I did provide in the memo some analysis and overview of each of these pilots. I do have some slides if council members would like to revisit some of those points, but I wanted to, in the interest of time, dive right into some of the action items that we needed to explore. The first has to do with council chats in 2019. So this chart at the top of the slide talks about 4 potential options for how we approach the council chats program in 2019. Staff is making a recommendation, again, based on the lessons learned and some of the understanding we have of what it takes to coordinate this type of a program in a meaningful way. The staff recommendation is that we would host 4 chats in 2019. Because we've tried to get at least 2 council members at each chat, and we ideally, when we have a full council, have 9 members, we would recommend that we allow up to 3 council members at each. That also allows for the sort of natural attrition that sometimes can happen if somebody becomes ill. Would at least still be 2 council members at each to make it meaningful for community members who participate. We had a great success in attendance numbers by holding one of our 8 sessions last year at a What's Up Boulder, at the What's Up Boulder event, so we would certainly recommend that we do that again. And then the chats where council members expressed to me that they found a lot of meaning were ones where we were very successful at drawing less connected community members. So I would suggest that the other 3 prioritize participation by those community members by going to places where they're comfortable, designating one as Spanish First, for example. They certainly would be open to all community members, but we learned a lot about the effectiveness and the value that people feel we're placing in them if we take the time and energy to go to a location that's convenient for them. And then lastly, part of our recommendation would be to get council direction from you on whether, if we continue the chats format, which is much more of a small group dialogue dynamic, if there would be additional training that would be helpful for you all before you embark on that effort in 2019. The next question that we're going to be talking about is a remote participation pilot. So as council probably recalls, and just to quickly refresh the public, we had a 4-month pilot where we allowed up to 3 community members to call in and provide live testimony over an audio system for open comment. We were able to achieve the technological steps we needed to make that work, but we found that there was very little public participation in that arena. One of the ideas that has come up as a potential, because we do recognize that while that particular solution didn't really seem to meet the community's needs or generate enough interest. We do know that there are barriers for people who want to come on Tuesday nights to participate, and that because they can't for a variety of reasons, their voices often aren't heard. So we started looking at what some other cities are doing, and there are some cities who allow pre-recorded audio or video testimony. So if council were interested in having us explore that further, we would definitely have more research to do. We could do that, and we would suggest launching a limited time pilot in third quarter that would allow us again to see if the public uptake on that would be high enough to warrant the additional efforts that it might take to allow the city to better understand the workflow and staffing implications of such a system, and then let council and the community experience how that testimony impacts the dynamics of decision making. So we're looking for some feedback as to whether that is an idea or if there are other remote participation pilot thoughts that you'd like to share. So again, I do have some information if council wants to go into more of the findings and learnings from each of these pilots, but we thought we would try to get right to the questions tonight since you have such a busy agenda.
Thank you. So council, you want to just tackle these 1 through 4, take them at the beginning? Does council wish to continue chats with council in 2019? I'm seeing thumbs up over here, a couple of thumbs up over here. Bob, question or comment?
I wanted to throw out a suggestion. And Sarah and I have talked about this, and I've talked to the Transportation Department about this, so give me about 2 minutes to make a proposal. And this could be in lieu of one of the chats with council, or this could be in addition to. Some of you are familiar with Boulder Community Hospital's Walk with Docs program, and about once a month they have a doctor who leads a walk. Anybody can show up at a park and they walk for a mile or two, and in the course of that walk, the doctor actually talks about a health issue, and it's been immensely popular. They have sometimes over 100 people show up and talk to the doc as they walk, and of course, walking is healthy. So one idea I had is we could kind of rip that off and have a walk with council sessions where 1 or 2 of us could lead walks of a mile or two. You know, maybe we start in our respective neighborhood parks and come on down to the municipal building for some hot chocolate or lemonade or something like that. Obviously, during the course of the walk, we could be talking about whatever topics that folks have on their minds. It's not unlike what we have with chats with council. We have to kind of figure out how we staff that and facilitate that so that we have meaningful dialogue as we're walking along. And it seems to me it would serve 2 purposes. One, the obvious one, which is we could have a chat or discussion, a free-flowing discussion with folks as we walk. And as you all know, when you walk with somebody, the conversation tends to be a little bit more peer-like and collegial. And I think, you know, some of the boundaries and barriers that exist sometimes in conversations break down when you're actually having a stroll with somebody. And second, I think it feeds into a program that our transportation department is leading, which is to encourage and educate folks with respect to walking as an alternative mode of transportation. I call the program, I don't know, it hasn't been named yet, but I call the program Consider Walking. And that's all it is to encourage folks in our community to consider walking as an alternative mode of transportation. And one of the parts of the campaign could be a map where where you could put in your home and you could see in 10 and 15 and 30-minute radiuses how many places you could go in a short walk. And I think sometimes people are surprised how much of the city is very well walkable. So I want to throw that out as an engagement opportunity for council. If folks are interested in doing that, we can talk to Sarah in the Transportation Department about staffing it. If not interested, that's fine too, but I just want to throw it out there as a crazy idea.
Thumbs up generally for continuing the chats.
Excellent idea, Bob.
And consider walking with council. Lisa? I mean, you, Mary, lady, go. Why? Yes, why?
So I think it was transportation that had a program going with, it was a partnership with Walk to Connect. And Darcy Kitching was leading some walks. And I actually went on one of her walks, and it ended up being kind of a walk with council.
So Darcy and I had a long walk yesterday together, and we talked about this idea, and she seemed to be very excited about it, also with Amy Lewin in our transportation department. So this has been a bit of a brainstorm between transportation and the Walk to Connect folks and Sarah. So this is just really kind of a convergence of a whole lot of things.
Yeah, and what I liked about that particular walk is that the people that went on that walk weren't expecting a council member there. I went because it was something that I wanted to do, and so I ended up talking with a bunch of people that don't typically connect with. So with the goal of it being to connect with people that aren't typically connected, my suggestion would be to be a surprise walker on one of those walks.
Okay. So, Sarah, I'm seeing enthusiasm for carrying on with chats and maybe exploring some different ideas for walks with council. Sound good? Yep.
Yeah, I like your frequency idea. I thought that was good of reducing because there were a few too many. We got not many people at some of them. But so the 4 seemed about right to me, but add on top of. I love that idea, Bob. That's a fantastic idea.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, I think you're going in the right direction.
I mean, the one thing about the 3 council members is that you have to notice it if all 3 are going to show up.
Right.
So that kind
So
of,
we have actually, with the exception of one, we've noticed all of them, just to be as transparent as possible, but we do note, we know that that is an additional requirement.
got it.
So you can never not show up because it wasn't noticed.
So yeah, I'm in favor of keeping going and adding the walks idea in. I think that's great. Walks probably better, not in the dead of winter, but the other experience I've had walking with people during campaigns is you can use it as a chance to discuss the built environment, which is in Boulder, of great concern with people. And so the different densities and typologies and then downtown. And so I just think there's a lot of opportunity there.
No, that's great, Sam. As a matter of fact, when I walked with Amy and Darcy yesterday, we talked about that and where we could actually, while we want these conversations to be open-ended, we could also do a little briefing of council members as well. And council members can be prepared, I mean, obviously if they plan their walk ahead of time, to point out the built environment and also the natural environment. And so I think most of us have a pretty good sense of it, but we can, if we have a path, we can prep for that and make that a little bit of a learning exercise as well.
So what I think I'm hearing is that you would like me and other members of the engagement team to work with transportation colleagues to develop a proposal that takes into account the goals you're trying to achieve, addresses this question of whether these should be specifically designated as council walks or whether we recommend that council members be invited to show up to some of them unannounced and come back to council in some format and let you know what we're recommending, see what you think.
Okay, yep, last thought, Lisa?
I'd like to just add one thing. Go Boulder and transportation staff, when we were doing all of these improvements on Broadway, we did them, I think, in segments, and then they'd say, oh, well, and it was an open invitation to the community, but council could come. And the thing I liked about that is you would see what they were doing and improvements they had made to the multi-use path, the bus stops, and things like that. And so I love walking, and I wonder if we couldn't communicate somewhat better to just a regular citizen, having transportation staff taking them for walks, having planning staff taking them for walks, walking through different neighborhoods. Boulder's a great town to walk in, and anyway, and library staff, housing staff, just different topics to get people to understand what our staff is working on and what their tax dollars are paying for and some of the improvements we're seeing. And I just think that would be a really good way to kind of communicate what is this, we're talking about our accomplishments and everything. Well, they see it here, but if they had an opportunity to come out, and I'm not trying to add extra, but it'd be, I think, a really successful learning engagement and back and forth. And I think the staff and council members could learn more from the community in terms of, well, what are some of their problems with this, or maybe they don't have problems with it. Anyway, it's just an opportunity, and I think, as Bob said, when you're out walking, I think people let down their guards and nobody's behind a desk, you're actually just walking next to each other, kind of equal.
Fantastic. Okay. I want to move on then to,
Just real quickly, I wanted to thank Sarah for her hard work on this, and I think, especially with the one at Sacred Heart, and you did a wonderful job, and And I think as part of this, this is what kind of motivated the whole bilingual pay suggestion, because you connect with the community, the monolingual Spanish speakers, and then you have to follow up. And then that becomes a real challenge if the capacity isn't there to follow up. So I want to thank Sarah for that, and I think it was a great idea, and lots of work that you put into it has, I think, paid off. So thanks.
That might be a nice segue, though, into I'm looking at the second component of Sarah's second question for you, which is, are there specific segments of the community that council would like to reach as you're going forward? I think specifically you thought about chats, but if it's relevant to walks as well, are you looking to connect with any groups of humans in particular?
Anyone who doesn't show up on a Tuesday night.
Everybody else.
Everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it really is everybody else, people, because a lot of times there will be a session on development and growth and hosted by planning, and we will see many of the same people who have opinions that we've heard many times, and so it would be nice to get airtime with people who we hear from a lot less.
And do you, Sarah, can you guess at who everybody else is, and is that enough direction for you to explore that?
I think it's enough direction. It is kind of a broad stroke, but I think we know some populations who have more barriers at least, and they're easier to define and work towards.
And I thought the one with the Spanish-speaking community was hugely successful that Mary and I did, and so let's please do another one of those.
We'll see if we can build on that.
Awesome.
I think, and I think we're all just learning, but location, as you point out in the memo, it's really important. Time of day, you know, because unfortunately mine was like a couple people, and
I know.
it was same people. So I mean, I had a nice conversation with Scott Green, but anyway.
Okay. How about the third question that Sarah's posing for you here, which is, would you like more training in community engagement for yourselves in order to hone your own skills as you're out in the world, or are you good? You're good?
I would, because I found myself in Amirbai, and I actually had a kind of tough one a few weeks ago. I learned, personally, I'd like to learn a little bit more about how to engage in difficult situations. You know, when you have somebody who's very persistent or very contentious or doesn't want to stay on the topic. I mean, we've all dealt with that, you know, on real time. And I'd like to learn a little bit more about how to manage different situations and maybe do some role play and that kind of stuff. If no one else wants to do it, that's fine. But if there are more than 2 or 3 of us that want to do it, I think we could all learn and grow from that.
Mary, what do you think?
Well, I mean, that happens during a campaign, and that's the training, I think, that you get when you're campaigning. So, I don't know.
You're comfortable with what you have. How about you, Lisa?
You've been through 2. I've only been through 1.
I've campaigned 6 times for me and a bunch of times for a lot of other people.
So you're comfortable?
I'm totally comfortable with people.
Hey, Mirabai, would you like more? Are you good?
I wouldn't mind jumping in with Bob. I mean, again, for me, it's a time issue, so there's not many times that I have available, but I wouldn't mind a little assistance.
Okay. Aaron?
If it's scheduled and I can make it, I'd love to go.
Okay. Sam?
About the same. I mean, I agree with Mary and Lisa that campaigning does give you a lot of opportunities to learn and grow. But if I was available, I would come to a session.
This kind of thing is literally our job, but you can always be better at your job.
Indeed, and difficult situations and tricky personalities are ever evolving, I find, in my own work. So is that enough information for you to kind of explore some options?
Certainly explore some options.
Okay. And of course, we are missing several members of council as well who might share the interest. Fantastic. And Sarah's fourth question is, do you want to try to pilot some additional forms of remote council participation? She gave you some suggestions in terms of pre-recorded stuff. What are your thoughts, Mary, and then Sam?
So when that was suggested, the thing that came to mind immediately was the video from Ponderosa that Housing presented, because a lot of people couldn't make it, and so they did that, and it was fantastic. And then, you know, and I just wanted to mention that during the hearing for the towing ordinance, I made tons of phone calls to try and get people to come out, but a lot of people couldn't. And I actually saw a gentleman who kind of poked his head in, and I don't know why he didn't go ahead and come in, but he just looked in and turned around and left, never came back in. So there's different kinds of barriers, and I think that that kind of thing could be really great.
Okay. Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I think in two ways it could be really good. The call-in didn't work. I mean, people just weren't that interested, and they're still like really time restricted and when they have to be available. And so I think the pre-recording idea is really smart. And so I think for public participation, we just give people the same 2 minutes and they can say whatever they want, but it also enables people to get a translation done if they need one, right? And so the translation then isn't live and taking up part of their time. It could be either, dubbed or put in subtitles. So I think it's a great idea to explore. Again, I don't know if people are going to jump on it or not because they have to prepare a little bit and then send us something. But the way we did it before was 2 slots that we had reserved for.
We had 3 slots for open comment.
So we could do the same thing here and make 3 slots available and see if people want to do it.
Cool. Bob, thought?
If it's 2 or 3 slots, I think that's fine, and we can broadcast those during open comment or the public hearing, whatever it is. If it was something more lengthy, in other words, if somebody wanted to put together a video with 10 people or 20 people talking at a minute or 2 each, I think that's something we would want to make available to council, but not necessarily play at a council meeting where we all could just click on it on our own computers and listen to it. So I think volume does matter. If it's 2 or 3, I'm fine with it during the meeting. If it's more than that, I think we probably just make that another resource.
Worth a try.
Yep. Does it help you?
Yep, that helps a lot. We'll do a little bit more research on some of the different considerations we would want to have in putting together a program and communicate that as part of a work plan item.
Fantastic. Sarah, can we do anything else for you this evening?
I'm good.
Thank you, ma'am. That was great. All righty. Council, check out the agenda. This item was going to be community engagement update from Sarah, which you just completed, and process improvements for 30 more minutes. I'm just watching the time. I am also aware that we have 2 hours on our actual retreat agenda for process stuff. And I'm wondering if you want to punt on process tonight in order to go home to your cozy little beds. I looked at the list of ideas that you have, and I would just want to pose you one question to think about before the retreat, if you're cool with that. Bob and Mary, maybe I look at you first since you're the retreat committee, and I'm just making stuff up as we go along. What do you think?
I agree. First of all, I think we made great progress tonight, and I was delighted at how close I think we are on the substantive matters. And so I don't think we're going to need as much time at the retreat for substantive matters. I also would feel uncomfortable about making any process decisions tonight with 2 of our members missing, particularly since they had some great ideas. So I would suggest that we punt on process tonight, expand that part of the retreat agenda a little bit more, and because I think we're going to need less time on substance.
Anyone opposed?
I agree with that process suggestion.
Okay. About process? Fantastic. The one thing that I would love for you all to consider and I will ask you this at the retreat, so just heads up, this is coming, is when you bring process improvement ideas, I'd love for you to be able to articulate for all of us, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Process improvements are great. If they're just for funsies, though, that's one thing. And if there's an actual problem that you or other council members or the community or whatever is experiencing, it might help us to know specifically what that is so we can make sure we have the right solution for the problem and not just a solution perhaps in search of a problem. So heads up, that's coming at the retreat. And in the meantime, we will table any further discussion on those ideas until we have our full number at the retreat. And then that leaves us with our conversation about council committee assignments, which sometimes is a lot, but tonight does not need to be a lot. A primary challenge that we have is, as you of course know, Jill has stepped down and was on a bunch of committees. So what I'd like to do, just to start with, is walk through those committees that Jill was serving on and see if one of you wants to step up. In some cases, there were already 3 people on the committee, and you could just tell me if you want to let it lie. And then if anyone wants to make any additional changes, my understanding is you don't, but if suddenly you had a huzzah moment, we can do that.
Can I just say something? I want to thank staff for being here
thank
tonight
you.
And hanging with us.
Good night, staff.
Thank you so much.
See you on the 18th. Except for you, Chris, I'll see you sooner than that. Okay. All right. So Jill served on the Boulder County Consortium of Cities with Cindy. Cindy's not here to see or to state whether another body is needed. Does anyone have a sense? Is that a two-body person, or is one going to cut it?
There, usually it's a main person and an alternate. I don't know if where Jill was.
Okay, does that, yep.
So I might talk to Cindy about maybe she would be willing to step up and be the main member and I could be the alternate.
Yeah, I think having been on it before, though, it's important. And I think it's always good to have that alternate.
Okay.
And so you have backup.
So Aaron, you follow up with Cindy? And if Cindy wants to remain the alternate and you'll be the alternate?
We'll have a discussion.
And arm wrestle and see who wins. My money's on Cindy in an arm wrestling.
She's fierce.
She's awesome. All right, fantastic. Moving on then to our internal city committees list. Jill also serves, Sam, with you on the Community Benefit Process Subcommittee. Does that need two bodies?
I think it would benefit.
Okay.
I think it would benefit from two bodies.
Anyone want to volunteer? Does everyone know what that is? Can you give us 2 sentences what that is, Sam, just real quick?
So we're in this process of defining community benefit and coming up with a way that going through the site plan review process, there could be community benefit that comes with extra height or extra floor area ratio. And so it's just a work process that we have going on. And in the past, we have had 2-person council committees like we have right now on the Open Space Board of Open Space Master Planning process. And we also did it for the comp plan. So it really, we haven't met yet. So I don't think it's going to be a high level of time commitment.
And you didn't miss anything. Yes, Mirabai?
I could jump on that if it's not a huge time commitment.
Anyone want to arm wrestle Mirabai for that opportunity? Congratulations, Mirabai. All right. And coming down then to the Legislative Committee, Jill was on that along with Suzanne and Sam and Aaron. Word on the street is that you might be interested in that one.
I am. I'm quite interested. I grudgingly gave that to Jill last year. And
Oh, so you will less grudgingly take it back?
if that's all right with folks.
Anyone opposed?
So I just wanted to bring up, Bob has made a request to be on that subcommittee before. But what I was going to say was, Aaron was angling to maybe expand the membership of the committee. It's an interesting committee, and so we meet with the lobbyists like once a month. And so I just thought I would bring up, Bob.
I appreciate that. Let me say, I'm happy to have Aaron serve on that committee, and if I run and if I'm reelected, I might raise my hand next year to be on the committee.
But for now, you'll let Aaron take over. Cool, thank you.
Thanks.
And if you expand it, let us know, and you need more members, we'll see what we can do for you. How about the School Issues Committee? That's Lisa and Mary already. Do you need another person on that one?
That hardly ever meets. But when it does, it's important.
Okay. Does anyone want to volunteer to fill in on that one for It Hardly Ever Meets? Okay. We can check certainly with Suzanne and Cindy when we see them next. So we'll put a note on the retreat agenda just to talk to them.
Well, and I think we'll go through these. Some of these either because they're doubled or tripled up, or because they just have. Some of these we could probably get by for 10 months without having a person.
Okay.
So
We'll give them a chance, and if they're either one of them's itching to do it, then fantastic. And if not, we'll let it lie. I do note, though, that Jill was the only member from council on the BMOCA board. Does anyone want to volunteer to fill in that? Bob, you have some relationship there. What do you know?
Well, they asked me about that today, and they asked me to volunteer, and I said no. I'm afraid I've got too many monthly boards already. If somebody else wants to do it, jump on it. My personal opinion is I love BMOCA, but I'm not sure. I think they could probably get by for a few months without having a council liaison.
Okay.
But if someone really wants to do it,
Anyone itching for a piece of BMOCA? Okay. So similarly, we'll give Cindy and Suzanne a chance at the retreat, and then if not, we'll let that one lie. Okay. How about on the Downtown Business Improvement District Board? Bob, that's you already on it. Does that need two?
I think it could probably get by with one. I go to about 90% of them. Jill in her first year probably went to about half of them. Sam and I used to serve on it together. I think almost everybody here has served on that at one point in time. I think as long as you have somebody who's at least one person is always going, it's probably sufficient to have one. I do know that I'll be able to make most, if not all of the ones this year. If someone wants to partner with me, that would be great, but if no one does, I can probably get by without.
Okay. Anyone here itching to do that?
I might do that again. I mean, I enjoyed it, actually, and, Bob and I could give different perspectives on the same issues, so.
Okay.
So, Bob, remind me, is it Tuesday, Thursday mornings?
It's Thursday mornings. It's been, ironically, interestingly, they moved the meeting from, it was usually being an 8 o'clock start, you might remember, Sam. They moved it to a 9 o'clock start to accommodate Jill.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if it's going to go back to 8 o'clock, or that's a discussion you can have with Sean.
Okay.
Okay.
7:30.
It was 7:30 when I first started with Mary, yeah.
Jill, not a morning person?
Eight
Well, she
is-
had kids to take care
got
of, yeah.
Okay, so Sam, that's you? Aaron, I noticed you reaching for your microphone. Do you want to arm wrestle Sam for that?
No, it's all right. If you're, no, well, partly is that there's still a little bit of an open question if I'm allowed to continue on the urban drainage and flood control district. And that's like 4 hours a month, so it's a pretty heavy lift.
What do you mean allowed? Are they banishing you because you've been difficult?
Technically, you're supposed to be the mayor or mayor pro tem, and I just finished, but I have a 2-year term. I was appointed for 2 years, so it's unclear if I get to finish out the 2-year term or if I have to sick Sam on it.
So just, I was able to finish off the 2-year term, just because that's what they're used to working with, so for what it's worth.
And I know you did. I just put in an official check-in with them, and they haven't figured it out yet, so.
Yeah, this happened with me on there, and I think I got the 2-year too, but it was a gubernatorial kind of checkoff.
Okay.
And I mean, actually, somehow, and I guess that has to be brought up at the state legislature, but why Denver gets,
Hey, please do not open the urban.
So anyway,
We're not doing that tonight.
I'm going to assume I'm still serving on that, and then I'm not going to volunteer for anything else because I'm.
Okay.
But if I go off of it, maybe I'll swap with probably Sam.
Okay. Okay, cool. But in the meantime, Sam, tag you're it. Cool. All right, Sister Cities, it looked like Jill was involved in the Sister Cities subcommittee itself, and then also was representing you in Yamagata and Kathmandu. What do you think about that? You're the other Sister City
so
committee
I'm
person.
on the sister cities, and I'm happy to continue on that.
Do you need another body? Do you need another body on the subcommittee?
I think it would be helpful.
Okay.
And so I would like to have another body. And I guess from my perspective, I think on all of these committees, it's good to set people up. I'm leaving, so I'd like to have somebody
transition.
So I'd like to have smooth transitions on everything.
So starting with the Sister Cities subcommittee, that talks about all the things. Anyone want to lean in for that one?
That's the subcommittee I'm talking
Right,
about.
yeah.
So at CAC, I had put my name out there.
Okay.
But in the interest of looking further down the road of teeing somebody up, I think it might make sense to have somebody else
Literally
do
saw
it.
you just look at Mayor by teeing somebody up. Anybody? I don't know. Do you want to try it for now?
Okay.
Cindy may, what about?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, check
in
with Cindy.
No, we
and-
can ask Cindy
Okay.
or
Cindy or
Suzanne. Suzanne, she's pretty busy doing the
Things.
mayor's stuff.
Okay. So we'll ask Cindy and Suzanne at the retreat, and then if not, sounds like Mirabai, you could be persuaded.
Literally don't have the
You don't have time. Okay, great. So then it'd be Mary if they can't do it. Okay. So lonely. And then what about Yamagata and Kathmandu?
So I would take Yamagata. My son's studying Japanese, so.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Aaron, take Yamagata. How about Kathmandu?
I mean, I can take him and mine never meets.
Okay,
so.
fantastic. Thank you. All right. So we will check back with Cindy and Suzanne on a couple of these school issues, BMOCA, and Sister City Subcommittee at the retreat. And then we'll get closure on that. And it's okay if we get closure on that. It's not urgent, right? Okay, fantastic. Okay. In that case, our last item of discussion today is the council retreat.
We have other boards.
We do?
So,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, did you want to? Uh-huh.
I went off the hill.
Oh, you went off the hill.
Investment
Uh-huh.
working group, and Cindy said she was
Thank you.
neighborhood stuff.
Okay. Lisa off, and Cindy said she would do it. Uh-huh. Okay. Anybody else have changes that we didn't discuss? Okay. All right, now the last agenda item is the agenda. We've already made one adjustment. Bob, you said we might want to extend the council process stuff at the retreat. I don't know that we'll need to, but good to know that we have that option. So if you look at the agenda, roughly the plan is this. We're going to review the agenda because that'll be fun. Yeah, it should be in. Did Lynette give it to you in packets? It's in the packet. It's in your electronic packet, not a handout. I will talk you through it because she gave me one and again wrote my name really pretty in the corner.
Oh,
yeah.
Page 195 of the study session.
Page 195 of the study session packet. I don't know how you guys do it.
It's a short one.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't cry for me.
You people are amazing. Okay, at 4 p.m., welcome and agenda review. At 4:05, council process improvements. That's the thing we didn't talk about today, where you'll be focusing on the problem you're trying to solve, and we will do the thing that we do where we talk about ideas and then we get agreements and proceed from there. 6-ish, we'll grab dinner. The idea is that you would have a working dinner in order to make the best use of your time and get you back out of there as soon as we can. At 6:15 is when we will be revisiting the work plan and priority items. So my takeaway, Bob, was similar to yours, that there seems to be a fair amount of alignment and convergence in council members about work items, and sounds like staff is in some way doing most of the things that you all wanted them to do. I do have the impression also that what you want them to do that is already underway is a lot. And planning staff in particular would like to prepare some options and ideas for you about how to sequence and integrate these things into their work plan. So with your permission, what we'd like to do at the retreat there is start that conversation with some thoughts from Chris and the planning staff about how they can make sense of all these pieces, the opportunity zone stuff, the BC stuff seems to be harder than it sounds to fit into the stuff they're already doing. So they'd like to bring you some options to tackle, and then we'll take it from there. We had a couple items, a couple of new items were actually not on planning's work plate. So we'll also talk about the city head tax. Tom, that sounds like that might come from your shop, city head tax. Is that a lawyer thing, or is that a?
Not really. I mean, we've done this before. There's lots of analysis that council's gotten in the past on the city head tax. It's really a ballot measure question.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In the past, council's considered it and decided not to put it on the ballot.
So we'll talk about it as an idea and see where you are on that one. And then we'll talk about the city custodial workers. Sounds like you've also done some analysis on that in the past. So I think it's a fairly straightforward agenda. I think that planning conversation may be a little tricky. But I can't tell you what we're going to do about it because I don't know what they're going to present, because they were waiting to hear what you did tonight. And so they're going to hustle between now and the 18th to bring you some ideas. So we'll do that until it's done, which according to the agenda will be around 8:45. And then we will have a huzzah moment of yay, we have convergence around direction for staff for 2019. Perhaps there'll be some singing, and then we'll get you out of there by 9. Just as a reminder, the whole point of, yeah, we're gonna do those things. Yes, thank you. Okay. Lynette's reminding me that we also just said we were gonna do the committee assignments. So yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, and engagement, thank you, Gigi. All right then. Just wanna remind you that the reason why the retreat agenda is designed as it is that the one goal of the retreat on the 18th is to confirm or adjust the work priorities for 2019. Other stuff is great, and these items that Lynette has reminded me of is fantastic, but that's our number one priority, because as you have said, and Lisa alluded to, your staff they're working their tails off for you, and where we can help them be most efficient and most effective to bring you their best work will be a great outcome for everyone from the retreat. So that's the vision. Anyone have any questions, concerns, enthusiasms? Hot diggity. All right, friends, let us then be done with my part of it. Hey, Sam, you want your meeting back?
Yep, I'm going to take my meeting back just in time to bang the gavel. I want to say thanks to staff, thanks to you, Heather. This is really time effective as always, given how much we have to go through. And anybody else have anything they want to say? All right, we're adjourned.
Good night. Good job. Yeah. Well chaired, sir.
live from Paris on France 24.